Right.
The Town of Carlisle Board of Selectmen, soon to be hopefully, Select Board, Tuesday, January 28th, 2020 meeting. Tonight's agenda will be community input, discussion of possible vote on joining Bedford Lexington Veterans District. At 7:30, discussion on the Wheelabrator solid waste renewal proposal. At 8, 2020, town meeting warrant article presentations. At 9 o'clock, town government organization and policy bylaw review. 9:30, appointments and resignations. 9:40, town administrators report. 9:50, the liaison reports. 10 o'clock, approval of our minutes, and at 10:05, all things, God willing, adjournment. Sometimes I do take things out of order, but I try to start items, I try not to start items late. I might take them early, but I won't start them late. There we go. So, I see no discussion, no community input tonight. And I guess I just want to remind people that we do invite community input, to our meetings. If you have things that you want to, if you've reviewed our agendas and there's something that you would like to, tell us about these agenda items before we get to our discussions. We can't discuss them with you, but we do like to get the information so that we have that information when we get around to our discussions. Or if there's something that is bothering you and you think that's not on the agenda that you think we should be discussing, that's a good place to bring it forward to us so that we can consider putting them on a future agenda. All right. We're going to start the discussion of the possible vote on joining the Bedford Lexington Veterans District. Tim, you want to fill us in?
Sure. Sure. In your packet, you've got a proposed amendment to the I think it's the Lexington Bedford District is how it's titled actually. But an amendment that would allow Carlisle to join with Lexington and Bedford in a veterans district. Well, you'll remember, backing up slightly, Ken Buffum, our veterans agent, passed away last summer. And we have been looking for a way to replace Ken's services. Ken worked for very, short money. It was $1,500, whether we had any veterans cases or not. We found that hiring our own employee would be prohibitively expensive and not as efficient, I think, as being part of a district with two other communities. We looked at Lexington, Bedford, and Acton, Boxborough. It turns out that it would be approximately, the administrative piece of it would be about $9,000 or $10,000 a year to be part of Bedford, Lexington, and it would be about $15,000 a year to be part of the Acton, Boxborough district. This is aside from the veteran benefits that we have to pay in any event, and right now it's about $20,000 in benefits for two eligible veterans. Right now, we've got Priscilla doing a lot of the recertifying of veterans and things that she really shouldn't do, but is doing out of necessity and working with the town of Wilmington's Veterans District. They've, graciously offered to help until we decide what we're gonna do, but they can't do that on a permanent basis because it needs to be a contiguous community. One of the communities, at least in the district, needs to be contiguous. So the recommendation I'd make to the board, and I made it to the finance committee last fall when I presented a preliminary budget to them, is that we join with Lexington and Bedford for the purposes of sharing a veteran service officer. They actually have 1.5 such persons between those two communities. I met with the town managers. They assured us that Carlisle would not be a burden to them. In fact, they need a little more capacity in the district for their veterans officer. So the amendment would cover us joining the district, and there's also the underlying agreement that formed the district many years ago. Town council has reviewed both documents and is satisfied that they're in proper order. the town of Lexington actually, I got an email from the manager a little while ago. They actually voted last night, because all three communities have to vote for Carlisle to, join the district. So Lexington voted last night. They're holding off on executing the agreement until presumably Carlisle votes to join, and Bedford would do the same. But the finance committee is aware that this would be a cost, but we really got away with, a very inexpensive solution to veterans' services for many years. Well, frankly, we had, you know, one or no veterans eligible for benefits for many years, so it really wasn't much of a burden. But at one point last year, I think we had 3 or 4, and now it's down, the numbers come back down to 2. But if you were to ask Priscilla, it's among the many other things she's had to do, this is something that she really doesn't have time for, really properly, you know, shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be a veterans officer who has to be a veteran, number one, or, you know, been through the training program. So I'd recommend, you know, to the board that, and we can discuss, the agreement, but as I said, council's reviewed it, and it, you know, satisfied council. So we would be responsible for about 10% of the cost of administering the Veterans District. And the other 90% is split between Lexington and Bedford. And that's strictly on population. That's something that would be revisited.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the questions I had. It doesn't look like it's strictly on population, because Bedford has a 26% population, and they're paying 17%, and Lexington has a 63% population, and they're paying 73%. So I'm wondering why Lexington is subsidizing Bedford and not us.
Well, it looks like Lexington has taken on paying most of the benefits. So that might account for it.
Paying
I know that
our benefits?
Yeah, the benefits of the people, retirement benefits. I'm sorry, the, other benefits section,
I don't
number
know,
6, number 6.
Number 6, Medicare. I don't see where you're looking.
Unemployment insurance
that
premium.
section 6, that they,
Oh, section.
Lexington pays the,
Oh,
for the
because they're
benefits
paying the
of the,
benefits of the,
veteran service officer and the
okay.
director of
It's
the.
like they are paying more. They've taken on more.
They have been discussing, kind of, a better way to share the cost of the district. Over the years, since the district was formed, some veterans housing has opened up in Bedford, and there are actually more veterans eligible for benefits in Bedford now than, at one point, they were there was more in Lexington, and they were picking up more of the share. So they're talking about maybe a more equitable,
By benefits rather than by our population?
right,
Or
right, but this, I think the,
By the number of veterans, that would make
Yeah.
more sense.
yeah, the drafts, I mean, the spreadsheet that Lexington provided is based on the population of the district.
Yeah.
Because that,
Which is certainly very
Irrespective of-
beneficial to us.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, but it looks
This
like,
is-
too, that there's the director and then, what's the VSO? But it looks like Bedford picks up that, right? It's not a very clear spreadsheet, right? But it looks like with the director, right, there's all of that stuff, and there's benefits with that position. And they're at 65, and Bedford's 15, but the VSO position, what's that, veteran service?
veteran service officer, right.
Yeah, Lexington doesn't cover any of
picks
that,
up
but
all of
Bedford
that,
covers
right.
34.6, right? So I'm sure
Yeah, okay.
they probably,
Bless you.
yeah,
yeah, all right.
you know, I think it's the way that they split it to make it easy, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to divide benefits between 2 towns and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think there's one employee in each community currently. There's one in
Okay, maybe
Lexington,
that's what it is
one in
then, yeah.
Bedford.
So maybe this individual is based in Bedford, right? So you got the salary and then, see, it looks like, yeah, they pick up 100% of,
The VSO.
The VSO.
and 17% of the director. And Lexington picks up the rest of the director and none of the VSO, so that,
Okay.
and
so
then it
that
looks like,
added-
cause then the other stuff, 45, it's just making their numbers
All
work,
right,
I think.
just making them balance.
Yeah,
And we just pay 10% down the line, except for,
yeah. Yeah, and then it's,
And there's no end term to this, is there?
Yep, there is.
There
I think there's an
Oh, it's on the
exit,
beginning, I didn't see the end.
It's in the, it's actually in the agreement. It's like
I think any-
2022, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, 2022.
Yeah, June 30th, 2022.
Oh, okay, it's in the one
So it's
between
2
Lexington
years.
and Bedford.
That was, oh, that's right, because, and then these were just the changes to that,
Yeah,
so
it's
that
just the-
didn't get
just the
changed.
amendment, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
And the census, this is based on 2010, so after the census, numbers are
There'll be
gonna
a-
shift around anyway. 'Cause of the-
Another
Yeah.
adjustment to the,
So, Tim, you said that we're spending, that there's 1,500 of this is in the budget already?
yes, yeah. That's
And-
what the stipend we were paying the Veterans, Service Officer that we shared with Bill Ricka.
Is there any idea why Acton Boxborough was so much more? Were they just a larger percentage? You said that they wanted 15,000, right?
Yeah, I think, well, I think it's, I don't know if it was the population of the veterans population or the population of the communities. I mean, 'cause Boxborough is a similar sized town to Carlisle. Yeah, I'm not sure what was
Oh, that could
built into the overhead, yeah.
That could explain it, because we're jumping in with two much larger
Oh, no,
towns.
Yeah,
true,
it is
true, and they're,
probably,
yeah.
right.
Jumping in with a large town in another small town is gonna cost us more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Great.
So do we need to
Are there
make a
any other-
motion?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
Sure,
this
all those-
wouldn't, it's not necessarily the final language, but if the
Uh-huh.
board would just, you know, maybe vote an indication that
Yeah.
we're willing to do this, then,
right.
I would move that we authorize the town administrator to, execute a intermunicipal agreement with the towns of Bedford and Lexington for jointly hosting a Veteran Service Officer's office.
Second?
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think we should thank Priscilla for again.
Yes,
Going above and
yes.
picking
beyond.
up the ball and, yeah.
Jeez.
And do we
Is there
need to-
anything she doesn't do?
we don't need to
Her own
see this
job,
again, so-
Unfortunately, she feels guilty about that, but she's been doing everything else.
Yeah.
Wait. I don't think we need to see this again, so I'm wondering if we add into our motion a substantially the same
As presented.
as presented,
Yes.
then you don't have to come back and we're done.
Right.
Yep.
Could I also just make a friendly amendment that basically, that says that we're joining the Bedford Lexington Veterans District?
Okay.
Yeah. Or-
Any further friendly amendments? Were those accepted?
Yes.
Second?
Second?
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. You're at the Wheelabrator Solid Waste Renewal Proposal.
Well, Gary and I met with a representative of Wheelabrator a couple of weeks ago when, we shared the bad news, with Barney and Nathan, and Lana, and we met, the following week. The marketplace is such that we were told that, you know, virtually every facility is at capacity, so if we were to say no to Wheelabrator, they'd easily, you know, some other community would take that capacity, and, the marketplace is anywhere between $85 and $90 a ton, and I think we should do our due diligence and check that out, but what they have said is you'll find that everyone is at capacity, they can all get $85 to $90 a ton,
Yeah.
and, if you dropped out of this district, there might not be room at the inn at
We can build our own.
at another, facility.
Yeah.
We'll have to bury our trash.
So, they just signed up, I think, the city of Lowell at $80 a ton, but they're about 30,000 tons of trash a year. And they said in a lot of smaller towns, they're signing up at $90 a ton. I guess we've been a customer for a long time, so we're in the middle, kind of at 85. He said his expectation was that within the term of, and, you know, the escalators, I think maybe 3% a year, that within the 5 years, he goes, you might be glad you're at $90 a ton 3 or 4 years from now, because the market, it's a seller's, market.
Yeah.
And, it's the kind of the state of, the marketplace. Solid waste is not something you have to bid. We certainly can can, as I said, do our due diligence and check if there's capacity anywhere else and if it's at a different rate, but, I don't know why he would have told us that we're not gonna find that to be the case, but, you know, Gary and I can do that.
And what about getting, I mean, since we do the delivery, is this the closest place?
Oh, distance, I
Anybody?
don't, maybe there's, yeah, for the same,
Yeah, I mean, if you have to go to Worcester to
it might be.
dump it, it might be
Maine.
more of a problem, yeah, exactly. Well, you
Yeah.
saw, well, go on 95 and you see all the trucks coming down out of
Yeah,
Maine.
no, exactly, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, Casella.
Yeah.
Well, just out of curiosity, what was the rate this past year?
69.54.
Yeah.
69.54.
Yeah, our last 5-year agreement, they dropped the tipping fee, I think, to 64. We're at about 70 or 72 a ton. They dropped it to
Yeah.
64, and then, since then, it's come up to about $70 a ton. But this is,
Yeah.
was it a 30%? I mean, it's a pretty big,
This is a big incentive to reduce our solid waste.
well,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
What,
speaks to that.
yeah, what's our tonnage every year, do you know? I mean,
It's
in terms
about
of,
1,800 tons a year, something like that.
Yeah, I
Which
think we really,
We'd like to reduce, but
how is our study of beyond the,
Well, we can report on that now, or wait till the liaison reports.
30K
no, I think, let's do it now. We have,
a year,
till,
Well-
it's like 30 grand.
But, yeah, I mean, first, are you looking for us to actually,
Oh, yeah, make a.
No,
No,
they said they'd send us a formal proposal.
Yeah.
And I should add that, and I think I mentioned this at the meeting, is that with their communities, they're willing to fund, recycling projects or things that communities
Right, grant.
need or want at their transfer station, so they're open to that, you know, if we were to re-sign with Wheelabrator, they're open to, funding a project. Yeah, a small project
Okay,
or
well,
two,
And it
per
could be
year,
more than once.
per town,
Yeah,
yeah.
it could be per town per year.
so these
But,
prices are good for 30 days, are they gonna, do we need to tell them, go ahead and send us the new agreement, or what?
I'll check in with them, they, this was 2 weeks ago, I think we're probably gonna get it this week. They said they'd send us a formal
Yeah, 'cause this
proposal
was
Okay.
dated
that reflected
1/15.
these numbers.
Right.
yeah,
And they said it was virtually identical to what they're proposing, elsewhere in the district.
yeah. why don't
All
we-
right,
So it's more of an advisory, I guess, at this point.
so one thing that is already, well, maybe it'll come up when we discuss the town meeting, warrant articles, but in the section about the revolving funds,
Mhm.
to, change the wording for the transfer station, so revolving funds, so broaden it so that we can basically use those funds for other expenses, related to the transfer station, like the increase in the Wheelabrator.
Tipping fee.
Tipping fees.
Yeah, thanks. And Tim, you're saying that's already.
That's already on the warrant, the revolving funds are on every year,
Yeah,
but
so,
we can definitely, you know,
So
broaden the
that's-
purpose of
I
that,
think
that
that's, I don't
fund.
know whether we need to
Yep.
approve that or just agree that that's gonna happen, but.
Yep.
And then the other thing we talked about is, Gary's gonna talk, we have 3 haulers that work in town.
Mhm.
And we had some discussion about, there's really no mechanism in place right now to ensure that each of the residents that are hiring that hauler have actually got their sticker. And so, it used to be, some years ago, we would actually ask for a list, but we haven't done that in a while, so Gary was gonna talk to all 3 of the haulers, one of whom is one of his DPW staff members, and, say that we need to see those lists of their, customers, so that then we can cross-reference that at the police station to see if those people have their stickers. We also talked about potentially having some kind of a permit that the hauler has to pay for.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which we don't
Yeah.
have.
And one of the things, I use one of those haulers, and I have been actually carrying my compost personally, even though I am a hauler, because I haven't trusted that he's
They
gonna
would
put
do
it in the compost, so,
Right.
in fact, it's made me very nervous, so I'd like some assurance that haulers are going to be sorting stuff for us, because I sort it for him before he picks it up.
And do you
So
also sort your recyclables?
I do.
Yeah, and so does he provide you with containers for
No.
that? No, you provide him with it.
Yeah, but I don't know whether
Yeah.
he throws it all in one
Right.
spot, or if he actually takes it to the
Right,
various
and that was another
stations.
thing that came up, is to understand what those three haulers are doing. They're supposed to provide the ability to, to divide things up and put them in the appropriate recycling bins.
Right.
And we don't
Right.
know if they actually do
I
that
must
or not.
admit, I don't see them going to the recycling bins, I see them going right directly to,
The
solid
waste.
waste.
I used to see them go there a lot, but I haven't
I
for
haven't,
years
yeah.
now.
Yep.
No, and I was at the transfer station on Saturday, and one of them was backed up right to the closed
Yeah.
dumpster, you know, and the truck was packed, right? And the thing is so a resident, if you brought a truckload like that, you'd have to get the permit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you would have to pay $50. I know most people don't, right? But this is the thing, they're making money off of it. And,
Right.
you know, while it's nice to think that it's all Carlisle residents' trash, I have seen one of the haulers in particular coming from Bill Ricca, you know, with a truck full of trash, and I turned around one day and found, whoop, right into the transfer station, you know? So and it's not necessarily all of them, I mean, this is one in
Yeah.
particular that I followed, and they came from Bill Ricca, you know, it was right up for the intersection of Forest.
Yeah.
I think we need to institute some sort of permit, you know, and, you know, if they bring 50 trucks worth, they're making money off of each one of those bags,
Absolutely.
right? And, you know, I mean, it may or may not be Carlisle residents, but if a Carlisle resident brought a truck full that big of trash, it's a $50 permit. So, you know, why somebody who's profiting off of it shouldn't pay that same dumping fee, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
don't know
or
how to-
maybe what you do is, you know, you say, okay, look you know, we understand you're doing a service for the town, we're gonna charge you X amount per year.
Right, I think that's the way to go.
That's what
Yes.
that's what we discussed.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the way to go, with still ensuring that the people that they are servicing have a permit.
Right. Oh, without a doubt, that,
They would be
yeah.
required to submit a list
Right.
of those
Right.
customers.
Right.
I
Um,
frankly think they should do their own checking, because why should the town now, well, unless
Have
that's
to.
covered by our fee. I mean, that, to them, because whenever we ask people to do something that we have to check, that's our staff time doing
Right,
the checking.
our town
And
money,
so we
right.
better be sure that when we're charging that fee, that it's gonna cover that time, is all I'm
Yep.
Yeah.
saying.
Well, no, I think it would be perfectly fine if we just said, please provide a list of all your customers with a permit number.
With the permit,
With the
sure,
permit
but
There
number.
you go.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah, cause it's
Yeah.
easy enough to look it up with the permit number, right? Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, everything's numerical.
So Gary's on top of that, or he's going to get on top of that.
okay.
The third thing is the sticker fee itself, and I think we as a board need to discuss, and maybe it needs to be in the context of, you know, fees in general, because I know that's a discussion that other boards are having, but do we raise the sticker fee, or do we go with a per item charge, the way they do in Littleton, some combination of that? And, you know, you all heard the discussion that we had, at the last meeting. The folks that came to that discussion were, I think, primarily, people that like to take things out of the swap shed and, you know, are regularly kind of getting what they can out of it. But there was, I think, one or two comments from people that were saying, just raise the sticker fee, so. And I think also in this climate, if we're gonna be raising fees in other areas, this might be the time to raise our sticker fee
Yeah.
as well.
And we know that our costs have gone up.
Yes,
Yes.
And
absolutely.
the tipping fee has gone up significantly.
Yes.
Well, yeah,
Well,
even
and
just.
as I
This
should-
is
you
the
know,
time to
This is
do
the
it.
time to do it, 'cause
Yeah.
And as we
very
showed on
justifiable.
at the presentation, we're also used to make money on our recyclables, and we're not, we're losing money
Right.
now,
Yeah.
so.
I think, just, if I may just add
Yes,
a little bit.
please.
So what we talked about as the next step there was, you know, to sit down and kind of go through what are the current finances. You know, hopefully the revolving fund will be changed so that it can be used for, transfer station related, activities. And then kind of come up with a number that we feel comfortable with proposing, as an increase, but, we kind of talked about maybe doing it in 2 steps.
Phasing it in.
Because, we haven't come to the conclusion yet about the pay for individual items. And so what we may come, here for is, where do we feel comfortable where the fees should be, whether we're charging for items or not, and get it there? And then tackle are we gonna, how do we charge per item and things like that as a potential future thing, but not like go for broke on the fee, because if we do a lot on the fee and then we decide to do per item, then what do we do, right? Then we're kind of overcharging. But it all starts with the finances and trying to figure out what are the costs that we're trying to absorb with the fee.
Yeah.
We won't
We're-
get
and we're gonna do that
100% of the
next
way
week.
there.
I'm
Yeah.
personally a proponent of user fees, because the person who hires a hauler who does not use our facility is paying a fee for that. Why should they also pay for this, for, this transfer station if they're not using it?
Well, they wouldn't have to if you have you don't have to get a sticker.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah. That's true.
You don't have to get a sticker.
No, but they pay taxes, and if, our transfer station is not self-supporting,
Oh,
I
we're
see what you're
charging them
saying.
in their taxes.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of a
Gotcha.
hard argument, not to argue, but it's kind of a hard argument to make, given the cost of the transfer station versus the cost of the schools, where you may
Right.
also not be using it,
Right.
and we're not gonna be doing user fees there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yes and no, okay, yeah.
Well,
But I'm just trying to
Yeah,
frame it
frame
as
it,
what the goal
right.
is.
Yeah.
Is the goal to make the transfer station revenue neutral?
No.
Okay, so that's the question, that's what you say is no.
Well, and we have a
That would be
committee,
a
so
very,
I
very
think the
steep
committee
fee.
should come back with a proposal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we can act on it.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna
Right.
I'm just saying that
And-
that's not our goal.
That's not
That's
your
fine.
goal,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Our goal is to ease the burden.
Okay,
Right.
but,
But even just, the increase in tipping fees is
Right.
$30,000.
Yeah.
Right, times 5 is 150 grand over the 5 years, right? But 30,000 is significant, of course, we missed the window to raise the dump sticker, right? But I think,
Did we?
that's
For
a
this
real
year.
cost,
Oh,
and
for
if
this
you
year?
let people
Yeah.
know,
yeah.
which I'm sure, Priscilla's gonna put in the Mosquito. Yeah,
What'd
no,
you say?
General fund revenue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Revolving fund person.
Yes, general fund.
Um,
No, this,
General funds.
Nope, this would be in the
we're
fund.
talking revolving fund,
Yeah,
that's
we're
what we're
talking
talking
revolving
about.
fund,
Yeah.
to cover the costs.
But your
More.
revolving fund right now is making money opposed to.
Because we can't
Because we gotta
spend it.
spend it.
Because we
can't
can't
spend
spend it
So
on
if
other,
In general fund, you'd have all the money in there, you could.
We're gonna change what we can spend the revolving fund
Yeah,
on.
exactly.
yeah. Then the 4th item is this idea of trying to make the swap shop, more functional in the sense of, midday to the end of the day, it's a mess. There's stuff all over the place, boxes, people dump, they want the containers, so they dump all the items on the floor, et cetera. So, and also people not knowing exactly what goes where. So the idea of, having,
Have a concierge.
seeing it, well, and Tim's done some good work in figuring out with the COA, could we set up a couple of positions that would be, eligible for senior tax workers to do, where they'd obviously need to get a little orientation, and they would not be, responsible for, checking stickers or anything like that, but their goal would be to keep the swap shed in order, encourage people to display their items, to not just dump a bag, and if there's something looks like junk, to be able to say, why don't you just put that right into the solid waste, and be
Yeah.
able to direct people to different places. So I don't know if you wanna say a little bit about it, Tim, or actually, before you do, and so we thought if we could arrange this, and we have no idea if there will be a couple of seniors in town that would be interested in doing this, but,
I'm sure there will be.
we're gonna wait till the weather's nicer. It's an opportunity to be outside, interact with a lot of people, so we're thinking we'd do a trial, if we could arrange it for like maybe March, April, May, or April, May, June, something like that, and see how it goes. And
Yeah, and David and Angela both thought it was a great idea, and there is some available slots that we could
And you
use.
could even have sections within the swap shed of, electronics,
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Knickknacks.
Household
Knickknacks.
items.
Yeah, household
right,
items, microwaves.
Toys, yep, yep.
kind of thing,
You know,
yeah.
working
Yeah,
microwaves.
yeah.
And,
Well, there's
and
another one there today.
it was, so it's
Yeah.
number
And
three,
a
did you
50-inch
pick it up?
TV. I did not
A
pick it up, no.
50-inch TV?
Yeah.
Oh, you should have called me, I would have picked it up.
I think,
See, that live streaming camera might be useful there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the things we just talked about, just to make it clear, is to like, who does what and who's on first, is these people would report to the DPW, right?
Yes,
They would
yes,
report
not
to
to
If
us,
there was
yes.
some
Yeah,
issue, but also
Right.
if there was something that, you know,
But I still think we need a title, I think concierge would be the
we
right.
also thought ambassador.
Okay,
But I honestly think if you advertise that, like if you said, we want people to work the swap shed,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
hours, and even maybe say extend it a couple hours after the dump closes,
just
cause I
think
think
of
they
it, you
can
get
close
first dibs
everything
on
up, right?
everything.
Yeah, well, that's
You'll be
exactly it.
there.
Right, no, we certainly have more people than we do tonight, but I honestly think there would be enough people where you could, you could have like one Saturday. You could have 2 people on every Saturday
Absolutely.
throughout the summer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that much interest in it, so, I think
Our
you
hope-
can open it up
Yeah,
even more than
my
just-
hope in this, and I don't think that it was shared by everybody, but my hope in this is if we can actually get the garbage out of there
Yeah,
and keep it organized, we may be able to keep things there for a couple of days.
Yeah.
yes, yes,
And therefore
yes.
get more
Okay.
turnover.
Instead of the
Yes, I-
DPW having to throw it,
Yes.
We all
remove
don't, we all
everything the
don't
next day.
live on the same cloud that I'm on that thinks this might be possible, but,
That's all right, well, certainly I share the hope,
yeah.
let me put it to you that way.
No, but it's true, I mean, because it's, they just
It's
indiscriminately
wholesale,
throw, right? And.
They have to, there's no.
Right, no, exactly, no, there's no
room
other
for the next
option,
time
right?
around,
But if
yeah.
you do have that person and they're kind of continuously, waiting until the person leaves before they bring the junk to the, cause I can see that being a bit controversial, but yeah, I agree, and then, yeah, you can have stuff there for a couple of days, especially the stuff that comes in later,
Mhm.
right? Which
Right,
nobody
yeah.
ever really sees,
Right.
so, yeah, that's a good idea.
And then obviously the signage, which we've talked about
Yes.
before, but I think, and so the question we didn't resolve was about the swap shed hours and whether we limit, end early the, ability to drop something off. And I think we'll just hold off on that for now and try this other stuff
Try
and
the
see.
Yeah,
The
Yeah.
ambassadors /
Yeah.
concierges first and see if that
Right.
alleviates.
And the
The
better
other-
signage and,
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that we threw out there as a possibility that
Threw
we're
out
gonna
there.
keep talking about,
We're out there, get it?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it my turn now?
Can I go home now?
oh boy, here they go,
It's been your
okay,
turn all
okay,
night.
here they go.
Moving right along.
Was, maybe we have a late in the day permit that we sell to people who do sell things. And
Okay.
so, there's
Yeah, invite in
there's
secondhand
a
dealers.
special permit, it doesn't matter if you live in Carlisle or not, you have to have the permit,
Yeah.
but you can come
That's
in and you can collect.
non-residential. Not, because residents should be able to come in at any time, even if they resell, right?
Yes,
But
this
for
was,
out-
can
out
we,
of
can
town.
we sell
Okay.
a permit to
Okay.
people who are just gonna come in from
What
out of
about
town and resell?
teapot places
Tables,
and
yeah, they,
tables
no,
and-
they wouldn't, but
Table,
anyway.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, they're,
No.
they're.
I
but
do
they're
feel
not a
though
junk.
obligated to pass on what one of the members of the working group spoke to very passionately. And that is, that what we're trying to do is look at options that seem, that we think we can institute now and, may mean that we don't have to go to something like pay-as-you-throw, but there is a sentiment among some on this working group that really in the long run, the most effective way to reduce solid waste is to go to a pay-as-you-throw system, but we'll see how this
Yes,
goes.
I agree with that person. I think
Yeah.
That's the way
Okay.
you got, the only way at the end of the day, that we will incentivize people. And for your signage, I really, again, wanna repeat my encouragement that it all be graphic, no
Yes,
words, please.
yes.
Because people,
I know.
too much to read.
Right. And people don't read very well today.
Well, they do, but,
they
it's
just-
hard to penetrate when you have that much,
Yeah,
that much.
okay.
Excellent.
That's
Thank you. Well, that's.
the report. We are making
It's-
progress.
It is it sounds like there is progress being made, and I'm pleased. Okay, 7:30 was the discussion of the Wheelabrator,
We did
okay? 8 o'clock, we're half an hour
Alright.
ahead here,
Yay.
guys.
Wow.
The 2020 warrant article, are you here for
Can I
a
propose that we
particular
move
thing?
to?
Oh, okay,
the,
great,
I just was working for.
okay.
Maybe-
Great.
Can I propose that we move on to like the town administrator report or
Sure.
something that? Cause
In
people
case
might be
people-
interested, people
okay.
might be interested in,
All right.
right?
Nobody,
The,
again, nobody's interested in your report.
What-
It's a filler.
We could do that one,
That was the word.
or maybe, under appointments, we have the Insurance Advisory Committee. and
We can do that.
There's something.
Yeah,
Yep.
a part of that,
Something,
so,
okay, yes.
Kim is the
We
chair of that
need
group.
to furnish one member of the Board of Selectmen to the Insurance Advisory Committee. And I understand that the meetings will mostly be probably in the late afternoon. So we need somebody from the Board of Selectmen who would be willing and able to attend late afternoon meetings.
I would
It is.
volunteer for that,
Excellent. You-
because I've had some experience with that.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
Perfect. And he's
perfect
a lovely
person for
gentleman
it.
to work with. Okay,
But I'm mean and nasty on, as the day goes on and my martini time gets closer, so.
okay, so we're putting.
That's to bring,
Oh, we can have
putting
martinis.
Alan Brown to
Alan
serve
Brown.
as,
Alan
Alan Brown.
The way he's
Done
been.
that before.
All right, shall I make a motion?
go ahead.
All right, I move that the Board of Selectmen appoint the following individuals to serve on the Insurance Advisory Committee. Have we set a term for them?
It's an ad hoc committee, isn't it? So it's
Yeah.
kind of,
I think it's the annual,
and
we'd have to do it again in June, I think, at June 30.
can't we make this
Doing a little longer?
a committee that just that will, because it's just to do a job, and it's not a standing committee, is it? That we want to have,
You look at the next page, it kind of is a real committee.
Yeah.
But have they already been appointed if it's June, July to June?
because,
No,
No.
No?
is this, where,
For June of the following, I wouldn't do for this.
yeah, maybe.
June-
Where,
June of
where did
21?
this
As
charge?
needed through the budget process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we make it through, June of
21 or-
2021,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Let's do that.
okay.
All right, let's try it again then. I move that the Board of Selectmen appoint the following individuals to serve on the Insurance Advisory Committee, for a term to end.
On or about.
On or about June
30,
30,
2021.
2021. Kimberly Kane, Finance Director, to serve as the IAC Chairperson, non-voting. Timothy Goddard, Town Administrator, Personnel Director. Steve Mack to serve as the Police Union Representative. Kirk Bishop to serve as Dispatch Union Representative. Linda Venaria to serve as the Teachers Union Representative. Anush Coates to serve as Town Hall Non-Union Representative. Chris Serene to serve as DPW Non-Union Representative. Jennifer Pike to serve as the Library Non-Union Representative. Nancy Harvey to serve as the Town of Carlisle Retiree. James Darr to serve as the Finance Committee Representative. Alan Lewis to serve as the Board of Selectmen Representative.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? None.
and I
I'm
just
gonna-
was gonna ask in the open, but all of these people, all the employees are 20 hours or more? We
the,
didn't select anybody who wasn't 20 hours,
So
right?
they're all benefits.
no, yeah,
I'm not.
Yeah.
I just, cause it says they have to be,
yeah.
I was just checking.
She's over 20 between the two positions, correct? So, yeah,
Just have one other possible appointee who could be a department.
a department head, yeah. Well, we'll find.
And yeah, they're all.
All
That was
right,
causing trouble, huh?
all right, now we can do the, are you here for a particular agenda item?
Let's come, warrant articles, yeah.
All right, so let's, do the, town,
Town administrator's report, okay. Attached to, my report, you'll find a letter from the Coconut Hours, who
Actually, we didn't get, I didn't get
coordinating
that one,
this
no.
year's Old Home Day, activities.
It wasn't,
No,
it wasn't in
Not in
there.
the packet.
That's not in the packet?
No,
Oh,
that's okay.
well, they did send,
And it wasn't in the,
Sorry. Must not have.
They,
We had trouble with the machine here last week.
they did,
Wait, are you on the Old Home Day?
Yeah,
yeah. It's not in there?
no,
No,
it's just, that's the dates,
letter
right?
from them.
It's just the dates of.
The dates are on,
Are
the
we
dates are
really
in
not
here.
gonna
To
approve
see
Old Home Day?
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dates are in here.
That's right.
yeah, as
Uh,
long as those are the
technicality.
correct dates.
Vote it down.
That correspond to the letter.
So this is 2 weekends this year before 4th of July?
June 19th and 20th.
It's not the last weekend
yeah.
in June.
Yeah,
Right. They asked for the 19th and 20th, but I think it's 3 days, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
cause the
Friday,
motion
Saturday,
says
Sunday?
19, 20, 21, it says, it is 3
Well, that's
days.
what I put in the motion, but their letter
The
said
language
19 and
above.
20.
Yeah, it says 19.
I think it's parts of 3 days, correct?
It's typically goes over
Friday,
Sunday.
Saturday, and then
Yeah.
finishes on Sunday, so.
The softball
We can
game.
approve it, and if they don't do anything, they don't do anything.
I move that the board approve the request of the Old Home Day Committee to use town properties, facilities, and roadways to stage the Old Home Day celebration on June 19th through the 21st, 2020.
Second.
Any discussion? I'm just checking, that's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm putting in my calendar. It's Juneteenth on the 19th. Okay.
All right, item number 2 is, it was supposed to be the annual renomination of animal inspectors. I think I put it as reanimation
Yeah.
of,
I thought
animal
that was
inspectors, so it's,
interesting.
but, once again, Larry Sorley and Deb Tor are willing to serve as animal inspectors, and, the board nominates them, the state actually makes the appointments formally, but they're willing to serve again. So we have a motion for your action.
I move that the board nominate Deborah A. Torr and Lawrence Sorley as animal inspectors for the town of Carlisle in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 151.
Second.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So the form you included in this section, which is the Animal Control Officer Designation 2020 form, it's got Matt Svatek's name. But is
On the
that?
That's
form?
a dog control,
Yes, George.
That's
That's
different.
animal control.
animal
That's not
control, not inspector.
Animal,
Okay.
Yeah, but the
So there's-
form that's in here
Yeah.
is a different form than what we're,
Animal control,
about.
not
Okay.
inspector.
Okay, so
Right.
it's just a different form than what got included here for the animal control?
right, they're two different,
Two different
different
things.
offices,
Okay.
right.
And do we need to reappoint Matt?
We would
Well,
do
Matt
that.
and Larry are, maybe that's part of the confusion. Matt and Larry are animal control officers, they're done as annual appointments. So in June, you'd appoint both of them for another year. if
They're
willing.
animal control and Gary and Deb are animal inspectors?
this is in
Right.
our
Yeah, so
packet.
those they do barn permits.
Which
and
is
that.
Yeah,
for-
yeah, Deb, I know, because we.
So that's
Oh,
where the
yeah,
confusion
exactly.
is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The
So
wrong-
this
it's the
just
wrong
isn't,
form?
this was the wrong
It's the wrong form.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
The right form's with the letter.
They're talking our letter.
Okay.
I'm making you look bad.
Here we go, go for two
You're not making Tim look bad, Jen.
All right, item number 3, the dispatch.
Wait, we have to vote, we have we had a.
We have a
oh,
motion.
Motion and a second, and then we had further discussion asking about the forms.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yes, the dispatchers.
Okay, the dispatchers, would like to get started with collective bargaining. They would like to meet, late afternoons seem to work better for them, so it would be during the week, 4 PM to, 5 or 6 PM. So whomever on the board wants to be part of the bargaining, team, I guess it's,
Sorry?
Didn't we pick
I
somebody?
think we picked
I
some people
thought we
last
picked-
time.
Yeah.
I thought it was you and me.
Oh, I didn't think it was me.
Oh, I thought it was
Certainly not
because
me.
we
Hey,
did
I thought it
police.
was you and,
We did
yeah,
police.
Alan, you and Kate
Yeah.
Okay.
said you'd do that.
Oh, we did, okay.
Yeah,
So your afternoons are gonna be busy.
yeah, right.
so,
Just try and put them all in the same
Right.
one.
back-to-back meetings.
Well, we knocked police out real fast, so we
Yeah.
oughta,
Yeah.
Bang.
The dispatchers, yeah, historically are not as, tough, I think, as.
they're
the-
not as tough?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Okay, that's.
neither
even
one
better.
is bad, but, you know,
No,
they're,
I mean,
and it did go quickly
Is
last
that something
time.
we have to vote on, that they're gonna do it, or?
I thought
not,
we did
just
the
because,
last one. We agreed the last.
I think, is it because you're liaisons that, you didn't vote on it?
Not in the minutes.
Did it say anything
Yeah,
It
we
wasn't
take
in
it.
the minutes.
Okay, we can read.
about the,
It's
collective
probably
bargaining
wise to vote it again,
Yeah.
just to put it in the
Okay,
minutes.
so, I need a nomination or whatever, or an
A
appointment.
motion?
Motion.
I move that, we.
Authorize?
Authorize, yeah, Alan Lewis, and, Kate Reed, to, be part of the dispatchers' collective bargaining, negotiations.
Okay,
Second.
any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Who are the other people? There's somebody from FinCom gonna be there, or?
It,
And we had Jim Dar for the police, and I wonder if he'll do this one
I
as well.
did, Jim usually is the volunteer.
Yeah.
And sometimes Lynn Lipinski, but Jim usually makes all the meetings. Yeah. Okay. And then we have the, upcoming, meeting schedule, that we've got, mapped out so far. On the 11th, we have another coordination meeting with the Finance Committee and, various other committees. We should have a draft warrant, together, by then at least, not in final form, but, more fleshed out than the list of articles you see tonight.
Okay, I will be here on the 25th, I'm leaving the next day for Tasmania, and I'm coming back on the 9th. So I will be here for the 10th, but I'm not sure I'll be all there. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not.
So you'll be like Luke.
I'm not here on the 11th. Ah, wow, it only took you, what, 3 years to get a good shot at, well done, Alan.
All right.
Yeah, but I'm not here on the
Just-
11th.
You're not
actually.
even here, you're not
Yeah.
even here, you're
No,
not
I will
even,
be
not
in-
only are
I
you
will
not
be in
there, but you
Barcelona.
won't be here
Yeah.
or there.
Yeah.
She will be present, she might not be here. but
Right.
Yes, yes.
She'll be present, but I will not be present.
Okay, so you're gonna be in Barcelona.
So-
Oh, I hope you go
Are you
see the
around?
Gaudi,
On the 11th?
Grell
Because
Park.
otherwise,
Yeah.
we don't have a,
Oh,
Terrific.
and
fantastic.
Alan, are you available? Because if, well, you're gonna be here, okay,
Yeah,
maybe not, right, okay, so I
Yeah.
guess we don't have to worry about a quorum, all right.
No, I just,
Okay.
as I said,
Yeah,
just wanted to
gotcha.
let people know.
Gotcha.
that-
But Kate, do you wanna have Alan chair the March 10th meeting, so that he
Actually,
can have
that
everything
makes-
Wait, we're
together?
talking-
Yes, that makes a
We're
lot of
talking about
sense.
February 11th,
talking about
aren't we?
We're talking
No,
about-
I'm
What
talking
day
about
we
March
talking
10th.
March
Oh,
10th.
March 10th,
Oh.
okay.
That's a good
Oh,
point.
oh, oh.
We were talking about
Oh, you're
both.
months
You're
ahead.
right, you're right, we were
Okay.
talking about both.
But Luke's not here February 11th,
February 11th, yeah.
got it.
Yeah, so I think Alan,
Yeah, that's,
yeah, that way he can put the packet together and everything.
excellent.
Can I just
I'll be
ask,
available, but-
No
are we gonna get anything
Oh.
in advance to look at for this February 11th meeting? Where we're
Coordination meeting?
reviewing the operating and capital budget requests? Is there gonna be something ahead of time?
We'll
We should
ask the
have a
finance
liaison
committee for that.
Nathan, did you go to the LTC, when was that, Monday? This Monday or last
Yesterday.
Monday? Yesterday, yeah, so
Yep.
we'll probably have a liaison report about that.
Yeah, not a whole lot of details, but
Okay.
we only got through 2 things.
Okay.
It was only a 45-minute meeting.
So I guess the question then stands that, Barney asked is, are we gonna have, what sort of
Advanced material
Advanced
to look at?
We can
material?
ask the finance committee for some materials in advance.
Yeah, have them as part of the packet at least.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I'm not asking for more than that, more
Yep.
than
Yeah,
a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
days, but
Got it.
yeah. And the other thing about that February 11th meeting, so we have Civic Moxie planning to come, and they're thinking around 8 PM, that's what we talked about.
Mhm.
So is that still a reasonable time for them?
Sure, yes, yeah, we'll work around that,
So I'll wait to see what actually is
I'll
on the
send you
agenda,
the-
but if it could be around
the
then.
draft agenda,
with the
yep.
plan. And how much time do you think, this looks like a pretty full agenda.
Already, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there's 1 or 2 other things that have come up, Conscom.
Yep.
Is here tonight, but we may dispatch it tonight, but it might have to come back on
Yeah.
the 11th.
So do you think 20 minutes?
Yeah.
For Civic Moxie?
Civic Moxie, or longer?
What kind of questions are they gonna be asking?
Well, I'll send you the questions that are in these kitchen conversations, but it's really
Oh,
much.
it's the kitchen
it-
conver-
Well, not really, it's much broader really from us, it's sort of our priorities as a board.
We need to have time to.
I know.
Discuss it. Well, we'll discuss, so
So
don't
the-
cut it too short, because
Yeah.
this will be a good chance for us. You know, we don't often have a chance to discuss
Right.
things as a board, so let us take this opportunity to, minimum half hour, 45 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
I'd
Does
say.
it make sense to try to bump them to the 25th though? I mean, it's not necessarily
Oh,
critical.
because you're
that-
not gonna be
No,
here.
I don't, I've already talked with them about
Well,
it
I
a
know,
couple
but
of
I'd
times,
like you to be in part of this
Oh, no, I
discussion as a
appreciate that,
board.
I appreciate, I'm just, that's gonna be a long meeting. I mean, the town coordination stuff usually
Well,
goes
you're
on
right,
for.
that's not I
That's a
could
good
check and
idea.
see if they're
Yeah.
available, cause
Yes.
it's not,
Yeah,
they're,
that's true.
it's not too late for them to
Okay.
hear from us.
All
If
right.
it's
Yeah.
on the
That would be
25th, so
even
should I
better.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That
Yeah,
would
I
be better.
just because then we can give them the time that they deserve,
Yes.
but also too,
And
you
give
know.
ourselves the time
Right,
we
because,
deserve.
yeah, there's a lot to go through,
All right,
Yeah.
and then,
Okay,
and I'm not gonna be here.
no, well,
Okay.
that's okay,
Yeah,
good.
I'll email you my questions.
okay. All right, 10 minutes to 8. We've been through this whole thing, we've beaten it to death.
Minutes, liaisons.
Minutes,
or-
sure, let's do minutes. I don't wanna get to liaisons until later, because I wanna have time to discuss things. We have the minutes of Tuesday, January 14th. Do I have a motion for approval? Or approved as amended, or whatever you wanna move?
I gave a couple of small things to, Jen, but I would like to somewhere include near the beginning, just a note when we do not have, live streaming coverage, and that was the case with this meeting.
Yeah, I agree. So how do we
Otherwise,
do
I'm
that, with
happy
an
to-
asterisk somewhere, at the bottom, or a note at the end?
Maybe it's right at the beginning, you know, below the attendance who was there, it just didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move that we accept the minutes of January 14th, 2020.
As amended.
I have one,
As amended,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, you have a,
there's a period missing, that's all.
oh, okay,
geez.
as amended. Picky.
Yeah,
I'm
gotta
not
have
gonna
something,
use that
right?
amendment.
I mean, now she's got my name right.
I actually triple checked that.
And you, that's all you noticed?
That's all I found.
Well, there was a whole word missing,
Oh, all right.
and,
yeah.
Oh.
You're fired.
so we can
Right,
see
so
who's,
we
okay.
Go ahead then. and,
We
take
have
it.
a motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
we're
And
on
I need
December
another
10th.
motion, yes, for the second set.
So I move that we accept the minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting from Tuesday, December 10th, 2019.
I have, well, go ahead, is there a second?
Second.
I actually, submitted some changes, which you guys haven't seen. So I would like to ask you to amend your motion to, as amended.
And you're not gonna tell us what.
I was gonna
the-
say.
Oh,
Changes were?
Oh, it wasn't a change, I asked her to include the policy that we talked about, because it says, on the motion made, it was unanimously voted to adopt the following payroll procedures effective, and then there were no following payroll
Gotcha.
procedures, that's all. And then, and there was a minutes, approved the November 26th, 2019 as amended. So I thought we should put minutes as amended. That was one of my two big
Okay.
complaints.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. I'm just leaving mine in the back here, and you can look at them if you need to find out where some of those were. Okay. All right, it's almost 8. Let's do the 2020 warrant article presentations, vote to close the warrant. Planning board is not here.
Yes, yeah. Peter,
Oh, Peter, sorry. I was looking for Madeline, and you
Hiding
don't
in
look like
plain
her
sight.
a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the way you're sitting, you're kind of scooched down.
Yeah, let's, thank you, I appreciate that.
I'm trying.
I own up to my own mistakes, apologize. Would you like to make a presentation, do we need it?
Well, just, the planning board had submitted 5 potential, warrant articles. They're not proceeding with, an amendment to the solar photovoltaic facility bylaw. They're planning, they're planning, I think, on resubmitting basically in the same form, the marijuana articles from last time, and also designation of Church Street as a scenic road.
Oh,
So I think it's 4 potential articles. Peter, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
so. I'm sorry, you are doing the medical marijuana essentially as you did them last time?
No, there's definitely a review, we've discussed it, it's not gonna be as confusing.
Okay, because I thought.
Definitely there'll be
They were
some,
essentially as last time.
yeah, no, last,
I was going to
nothing can be said,
protest.
yeah, but we won't digress on that. So we've talked about as a board, kind of the timing of how we think we can support it is laid out, and that's what I'm sharing with you here.
Okay.
So we've discussed this with Madeline, we discussed it as a board last meeting, and, we have council coming in on our next meeting to discuss it, lay out some, review of last year's, and then what needs to be cleaned up, and then we'll go from there. So we're pretty confident we can hit this.
Okay. With
So this is-
Madeline at the helm, I'm pretty confident you will. too.
So this schedule is, so we're voting on final language on March 10th, so we'll have to have something outside of the warrant for this, outside of the book, right?
Yeah, well, it'll be close to the final language that's in the warrant book. Usually with zoning articles, we try to have the language as much like the motion that'll be voted on at town meeting as possible. Other articles have a more vague description, but where zoning amendments, we try to be more precise.
Right, but they're not having the public hearing until March 30th.
Yeah, I guess Madeline and I should have known that. 3/10 is the final date for final draft.
I just saw that here. Our meeting on March 10th, we're voting on final language.
And do we have to do it then? Maybe we can do it. When does it have to go to press, to the printer? We're working backward from the 27th, and we have to have it 2 weeks before that.
I would say it would be the week of the 17th, it's gotta go to the printer, so.
Okay,
we could
so
do it.
we can't,
We can't wait till the
until
24th, but
Yeah.
if the motion's different at town meeting, it's different, and that can be explained why, the warrant had to be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not looking at a wholesale change of the bylaw. It's cleaning up some of the mistakes that were in last year's presentation, and then, maybe expanding some of the language to allow, and we'll have the option of either, we are still discussing the 3 options that are in front of us, which ones we're actually gonna put forward. That will definitely happen before the 10th.
So where did we land on that?
So we're gonna accept the, text of the bylaw that you think you'll be,
Yeah.
it'll be something close to what will end up on it. Do you think the March 30th public hearing will substantially change?
We'll know if, at that hearing, it's not like we're gonna change it in 2 weeks, right? I mean, at that point, it's either gonna be, we're gonna, I don't know the exact term you use at town, but you'll pass or pull it. You know,
Yeah,
we'll,
you just won't
just
move
won't
it.
make
we'll move it, right, we'll just make
Not
sure.
advance.
If we get poor feedback on the 30th, then we would move to just not move it.
Okay.
But Madeline feels pretty strong, it's good to have something going at this point. It's been kind of languishing for a long time. That's it.
Okay.
And then the scenic road is, we'll notify residents if you guys decide to put it on the warrant.
What's the driving force behind this?
It's like a section of road where there's a scenic road, you know, it's right up here, but there's a section of road that's scenic, then it's not, then it's scenic again. So it's the only portion of that road set in the middle of town that's not scenic. So
Which,
it's the-
which portion is that?
portion
So
is
there's
the-
there's the side
It's church,
across the street here,
Yeah.
right? That short section.
yep,
And then there's church, the other side
it's
of.
the one that's on the common,
Oh,
Oh,
It's-
so.
Hmm.
And
so the rest of Church
Dropping.
Street is already a
then
scenic?
dropping down into Spalding. By the
That's
school.
that's already a scenic designated?
You know, I'd have to check on that, but it's from that section of the common through Spalding Field.
And who's
It's a-
requesting it?
The planning board. It doesn't come from a resident. So we'll notify the residents, after, if there's a decision to put it on the warrant.
Uh-huh. And what's the reasoning for the planning board saying we want this to be?
That's a good question. So, I don't have the strong, you know, push either way myself, and, I forget what was discussed, so I can't.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to have the characteristics of other scenic roads in town with,
Yeah, and we
With the
park, we
school
need to
and,
use it for parking.
yeah.
Well, it's the
Where?
preservation of the stone wall that's along that stretch.
Oh, that's
It's,
stone
that's
wa-
historic district though, so they can't do anything with the stone wall, right?
I don't know that for a fact.
It's only
so
plantings, and I'm pretty sure they can't. They
Yeah,
can't.
so it's curb cuttings, it's the stone wall, it's the trees,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
trees would not be historic.
yeah. And so I think the majority of the protection wants to be that short section that's kind of wooded where the playground is. Cause there's no stone wall past that, dropping down the
Right.
hill. That's the,
It just jumps out at
Yeah.
me as a potential conflict, cause now you'll have two boards that have say over what somebody wants to do, and you'll have to go to both boards, right? So you'd have to go to the planning board if you
And the
wanna do
historic.
something with a stone wall, and you're gonna have to go to HISCOM in order to do something with that stone wall, or curb cuts or something like that.
yeah,
yeah, how
I'm
many
not sure.
homes are there? 3?
I guess that's a good question. I don't know if there's a
Well, one's
conflict.
the church's home, right?
Right, and then there's
Yeah.
definitely the
Yeah.
one after.
And then
the
there's
restaurant,
Village
so-
Court, and then there's one after that,
Yeah,
and that's it.
yeah. And then
Well,
who owns
maybe-
the property after that?
That's,
So the
so-
Romaldo.
The majority of it's town
Is it?
on the right.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
right's
oh, yeah,
all
on the right,
town,
but
on
the
the
left
left
is-
is the
the
back,
left is-
that
yeah,
guy,
it's the
that's on,
psychiatrist.
yeah.
Maybe we should just, give you a chance to review.
Yeah, I'll bring the
that sounds
questions
like it's
back.
ready.
Board, and then we can always
Yeah.
put it on as an item at the
Yeah.
next meeting if, you wanna go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey,
The board should vote to refer the zoning bylaws to the planning board for the purposes of the public hearing that they'll have to conduct. That's the way, the process of
Should we do
of a
that?
zoning bylaw.
how about if we just do that right now, or no?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
You probably should do this, so we
Okay,
can
Okay.
so,
send that
could I have a
to them.
motion to,
refer.
I move that we refer, the following zoning bylaws, to the planning board for their, what?
Public hearing.
For purpose of a public hearing. One is revisions to the zoning bylaw, section 5.10 medical marijuana facilities. Number 2 is revisions to zoning bylaw, section 5.11 temporary moratorium on marijuana establishments.
That
Um,
says,
removal.
removal of the temporary moratorium.
The third is a new zoning bylaw section pertaining to recreational marijuana facilities.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And what about the?
I didn't do the scenic
Yeah,
road
I was
one.
gonna ask you about that.
I
That's
didn't
not
do that,
zoning.
just, it's not a
That's not a
zoning.
zoning, but,
It's not a
yeah.
zoning
so it's
bylaw.
Yes,
not
yeah,
required.
it's just a designation, okay, got it. Thank you, Peter.
And if it was, I was gonna separate it, because I wasn't
We
gonna go for
weren't
it.
ready, yeah.
Okey-doke. Complete streets?
That was,
Sorry.
Freeman had,
Mine move
presented
on.
that last time. I can go through a couple of them quickly. The Board of Health is meeting actually Thursday night to talk about the mosquito district proposal, but they had presented that to you, I think, a few meetings ago,
The Board of Health.
about joining that mosquito control district.
Did
I think
they?
it's-
I think Linda and
They
Kathy
mentioned
were
it,
here,
Yeah, when Linda and
It
Kathy
wasn't
were
really a
here.
presentation.
No.
Oh,
but
okay.
it was,
They were just gonna explore it more, they said.
but
Okay.
their, but
Thursday-
their board will take a position Thursday, I think,
Thursday,
on whether
they're
to,
supposed to be,
yeah.
On what? Sorry.
The
Mosquito
Joining a
control
mosquito
Joining one,
control
and that means
district.
that we would participate then in some kind of spraying?
Yeah, and to, I
And
think
it's
the cost
expensive.
is about $30,000 to, join the
Yeah.
district.
yeah,
Know more about that.
They're gonna discuss it and then make a recommendation back to us?
yes. Well, there's
Because
gonna
I
be
don't wanna
present-
vote on something.
Yeah, they're gonna need to hold some sort of public meeting on this, because it is not gonna just be a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slam dunk.
No, it was.
I
it
already
was-
got
it
an
was-
email about it.
It was defeated handsomely at the last time it was.
Right.
on
Gonna
town
add
meeting.
an hour and a half to town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Does anybody plan to go
Only
on
2 nights
Thursday? I
'cause of
have it on my
mosquitoes.
calendar. I'm trying to remember if I can still do it.
I may go.
All right,
30th, when is
Let me
it?
just double check that I can still make this.
Thursday, I think.
30th.
Thursday.
Yes, I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Thursday, the 30th, all right? Yeah, I have it on my calendar. I will definitely be going. Okay. So, I will let you know. 30th at 7, I think,
7:30,
or 7:30.
7:30, I think they meet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
January
nights
30th,
away.
yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, where is Board of Health
No,
usually
I have
have
it
their?
at, for 7. but-
Upstairs.
Yeah, they're usually upstairs, I think.
here,
The
yeah.
One, what is it, Nichols?
Nichols,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's gonna be a tight.
I hate that, I hate that room, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
And the Recreation Commission's proposing a dog park. They intend to, seek a private grant and then eventually CPA funding for that, so it doesn't need to be a standalone article
That's
on
the
the
other
warrant.
thing the AKC, by the way, gives grants for.
Yeah,
Dog
they-
parks,
They
Yeah.
didn't put in a CPA application, so.
so maybe next year's
Yeah.
CPA.
Yeah.
They're gonna seek a private grant now for, I guess, the design of the park, and then, so it doesn't need to be a separate warrant article, so that one's gonna go
What
away.
happened to the Spalding Field design and rebuild and AstroTurf from last year?
Yeah, did they ever get the, oh, I'm no longer it's Nathan though, I think is rec com, but, yeah, the study for
I go all the
Spalding.
time.
Yeah, cause they were
Did it-
supposed to do for all the sinkholes, right? They're
Yeah.
supposed to do a study and
Yes.
everything,
Yeah.
yeah.
That-
Yeah, I'm sure,
did that
I'm
just-
sure Drew followed up on it, I mean, Drew's not one to let the ball
I
drop.
can ask,
Did we, oh, well, I'd like to know, because we
About that,
gave
yeah.
them, what, 20K to do that?
Yeah,
And I'd
something
like
like
to
that.
know what happened.
Number 25 is going away?
Number,
Well, I would assume it's going away unless they somehow get,
yeah, it's not gonna be a standalone article, so it's,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not
You
gonna
don't
be a
have to
warrant
provide
article,
for it.
you're saying.
Yeah.
So that will not be.
and they haven't applied for CPA for this year, so
And
it would have to be next year.
do they have a proposed location for this?
I think they were thinking Banton Davis, right?
I think that's correct, yeah.
people go there anyway, so they just would have a, get them off the soccer
Yeah,
fields
just
and
give
into the,
them
you know,
Make-
let the people step in their own,
Yeah.
I'm doing
Okay.
it in my own yard at this point. Okay. And conservation,
Conservation,
okay. Well, Conservation,
And everybody's
here.
here, wow.
Come on up.
give us the,
well, chairs over there too.
Yes.
I don't know if it's better than ours, I don't know if it's better than ours.
Yeah, the big guns are here.
I
We're
hope you're
almost
suitably
outnumbered.
intimidated.
Doesn't take much.
do you know everybody? Do you know
No.
everybody?
No.
No.
This is Ken Bellitz, he's co-chair of the Cranberry Bog Working Group and on the Conservation Commission. You know me, this is Alex Para, who's on the Conservation Commission and on the Cranberry Bog Working Group. And that's Dan Wells, who's chair of the Conservation Commission.
Oh, okay.
And they're all very smart.
Well, I don't know about Alex,
It all went
Can I
up,
go
it
now?
all went up tremendously when you got off, Luke.
See what happens? Maybe I should do the same here, is that what you're trying to imply?
Yeah.
And come back to the conscom.
No, good.
All right, so you put in a $5,000 item in your operating budget? which
Yes.
The plan, the FinCom suggested didn't belong there,
Right.
and that's why you're here.
Right, and that
It'll
should
be
be a
a separate
warrant article.
warrant.
That should be a separate warrant article, because it was not a recurring item.
Okay.
Okay, but they didn't say, just take it out and don't put it as a warrant article, there's still in
No,
support
when-
of it, or?
When I called, Victor, and asked him about it, he said, that it needed to be a warrant article. So, he didn't say, don't bother, he said it
Yeah,
needs to
I
be a
mean,
warrant article, because it's.
So they still expressing some support of the, whatever.
Well, let's hear
Well,
the.
they may not take a
Right.
position.
plan.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so the backdrop of this is, I won't go hugely into the background, but the backdrop, of course, is the end of the commercial, cultivation of cranberries on the bog. And following that, the Cranberry Bog Alternatives Committee spent a couple of years, did a Herculean effort to evaluate the alternatives, and that culminated in a report, a supplemental report in March of 2018, recommending that the town seek to convert the Cranberry Bog to cultivation of hay. And part of that is driven just by the regulatory constraints that we face. It's all wetlands. And so in a very broad way, the Wetlands Protection Act limits us to for-profit commercial agriculture or projects that you might loosely call restoration, ecological restoration, or enhancement of the habitat values. So those are the kind of the broad alternatives that we have. I joined the working group last year, and at that point, I'm not quite sure of the history of the transition between the Alternatives Committee and the working group, but I joined the working group last year, and at that point, the working group was in the process of trying to figure out how to implement the recommendations of the Alternatives Committee, primarily the haying. And the problem that the group really faced is that the cost of converting to hay has been estimated at approximately $9,000 an acre. In discussions with Mark Duffy, he suggested that he would want to do approximately 30 of the 40 acres of the Cranberry Bog. So the town would be looking at something around $270,000 to implement that. So needless to say, we all had a gulp and started to look at how we might fund that. We did some outreach to outside groups. But the truth, I think, is that the working group's sense and evaluation was that really with the support for converting it to hay is kind of lukewarm. Everybody that we speak to always starts out with, gee whiz, why can't we do cranberries? And then I don't really like hay fields, et cetera. So that was the impetus for us to go back and look at the other alternatives that had been proposed. And short of benign neglect, all of the alternatives, and particularly the engineered ecological restoration
look, you know, that was serious money. I mean, initial investment of over $600,000, plus some 10 years of ongoing expense. None of that, you know, seemed viable or possible. And again, looking at the conversion to hay, one of the problems is even if the town were willing to invest the upfront costs of conversion, the long-term economics were doubtful at best, meaning just simply the cost of cultivating the hay on an annual basis was barely worth the economic cost of just going and buying the hay, frankly. So, that sent us to kind of to where we are today, and what we did was to invite on a volunteer basis, and we're very grateful to Mary Ann DePinto, who is with the Wetlands Program at DEP for 25 years, and Brian Windmiller, who is a wetlands scientist who I think he now runs an outfit called
Zoo New England.
Zoo New
Yeah,
England.
he's wildlife biologist.
And they both came out and did, you know, reviewed the situation with us. And their viewpoint, which was different from the information that had been supplied to the group previously, was that you could do a maintenance program that had a component of enhancing wildlife habitat, and that would be a low-cost alternative, maybe even close to what we're paying now on an annual basis for the maintenance of the bog, that could gain approval from DEP. And the essential idea is that this plan would involve, you know, removal of the trees that are growing up in the bog, removal of invasives, perhaps annual flooding or more often of the bogs to discourage growth of invasives and trees, and some other measures to enhance the value of the bog as primarily turtle habitat. So the warrant article that we would propose would be to fund the preparation by a qualified wetland scientist of the plan component. I think we feel confident in-house that we can prepare all of the administrative paperwork and the filing of the notice of intent, and so on and so forth, but we do need an outside person to prepare a viable plan. It was our view, Dan is, you know, in the business, an attorney that, you know, been involved in a lot of wetland stuff, and it was our view that 5,000 should be, you know, more than adequate to cover that cost. So that's, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, I just wanted to stress the, you know, for those of you, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the bog, but if, you know, the question is, why do we have to do anything? Why do we have to spend any money? And, you know, as we're already starting to see in the just a couple of years since they stopped harvesting, there's some red maple and other trees are starting to grow in there. And pretty much it seemed like one of the unanimous goals of people who use the bog or people involved in these working groups is maintaining those open vistas. So what this currently, under the agricultural exemption, we're allowed to cut, you know, pretty much do anything, manage the vegetation, but this is a way we can kind of pitch this to DEP as an ecological restoration. And also to point out, there is an endangered turtle, the Blandings turtle. There has been a record of that And it's presently, the Natural Heritage Program hasn't mapped the bog for this species, which is typically what happens. So we're not sure why that didn't happen, but we know, and that's a pretty important, it's a threatened species, they're very uncommon. So we're hoping part of this is to kind of manage the habitat, hoping maybe we can help them expand their population or at least provide ideal conditions for them. And it's not just the turtles, there's all kinds of wildlife that use this bog, and instead of being managed for cranberries, now we're gonna try and manage it so it's suitable, ideal conditions for wildlife. So this is a pretty good bang for your buck with this kind of approach. There's a limited project under the Wetlands Protection Act that allows for doing these kind of projects, as long as there's a clear benefit, ecological benefit. So we think we can easily meet the criteria to get approved the commission would be approving it, but ultimately DEP. There was an appeal.
There's nothing like being the judge of your own case.
But like Alex mentioned, I do this kind of work professionally, so between, and Alex, all of us and Sylvia's knowledge, we can do a lot of in-kind work on all the paperwork, but as volunteers, we can't do everything. We need some additional outside mapping and maybe surveys and things like that, we think for $5,000 we can get a lot accomplished for this.
And it would give you a referenceable plan.
Exactly.
As people change, the plan need,
Yeah.
And in addition, with documented plan, everything cost out.
Yeah.
So that as we plan the meetings, we have a sense of getting it out and get a good.
Yeah, I mean, even an empty field requires maintenance if you don't want it
To become.
to be completely overrun with all kinds of other things that you don't want, even if you are only gonna hay it.
Yeah. You have any?
Yeah, I have some questions, if I may.
Sure.
At first I was gonna summarize it a different way, is this plan going to take it out of agriculture and put it into conservation? Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed the answer.
The answer is yes, and I mean, just to flesh that out a little bit, is that the agriculture that's permitted under the Wetlands Protection Act is for-profit agriculture. It's gonna be intended to be, a commercial operation. And so, for a lot of reasons, I mean, I think everybody understands that cranberries are not viable in the bog. And the limitations on Mark Duffy himself in terms of what he can do out there are regulatory and based on FDA requirements. Basically, the only USDA, the only thing that he would be permitted to do is the haying. And so we come back to, presumptively, at least, the only agricultural option is the haying, and it's our judgment that the economics of that make it very uncertain. So we could do the conversion, and next year, 1, 2 years, 3 years down the road, somebody says, well, I don't want to hay it because it's more work than it's worth. So we don't see enough of a chance of sustainability to warrant the town making that kind of an investment.
Okay, and so this plan, and I'm not being flip here, but this plan is basically converting it to conservation land, but it's actually still kind of maintaining it as the bog as it is now, except for we're growing turtles, not cranberries.
Yeah, I mean,
Among other wildlife.
yes,
Right.
yeah, that,
Okay,
Although,
and,
to be fair, the cranberry vines will eventually die out.
Uh-huh.
And I think part of the attraction for people is those cranberry vines are really attractive. They change color all season, and so I think people have enjoyed that, but that will change.
And kind of the next part of my question is, in doing this, what happens like with dog walkers and things like that? If it's conservation land for this, there's a lot of dog walkers that go there. Are they still gonna be able to go there? Is that still gonna be preserved in those trails and everything?
Yeah, I mean, that's the objective. I don't know if you know, but, the working group has had a survey out, paper survey plus now an online survey, about the uses of the cranberry bog and what people like, and, I don't know, over 200 responses now, something
Oh,
like that.
well, I think it's over 300.
Over 300 responses. And one of the interesting things is the prevalence of dog walking as the preferred activity. The other thing that's interesting, which is off your question, but I'd bring it up anyway, is that a very large percentage of the visitors are not Carlisle residents.
I was gonna say,
Um,
I've had some people approach me.
Yeah.
Think, what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
I'll come to the next one.
But it shows that the bog has, regional significance, or at least more than
Appeal.
just
Yeah.
the town. And I think, as we go down this road, and we have had some outreach, to outside, nonprofit groups, I think there are some opportunities for the town to, engage people in a broader way, to help the town in managing and paying some of these expenses as we go forward.
And that was my second to last question. What is the estimated, if we go down this path and we turn it into conservation land, what's the estimated annual cost to maintain it?
So we're presently spending $12,000 a year, and that's, for maintenance of the water control structures and the, mowing and essentially the trails. It's just a guess right now, but I think that if we do this plan, that the additional maintenance is actually going to be intermittent, meaning that you would do tree removal possibly, once every 3 years. So I would hope that we could, do this extra work and not increase the existing budget, by more than 10,000 a year, so call it 30,000 over a 3-year period. That's a guess. Yeah, we need the plan in order to determine that.
And my last question is, there's a lot of bogs being lost down in southern Massachusetts with, obviously, they're all going out of business. Is this a one-way thing? What if it changes? What if the market changes? Is it possible to make it a bog again? If somebody came in and said, hey, I wanna do it, you have this bog?
I can address that. They've come up with new cultivars, so we'd have to replant the bog in new cultivars and pay for a conversion to update it. And then for Mark, what's made it worthwhile is that he rents all the equipment that he needs from all the other bog growers.
Mhm.
The whole industry's just been consolidated. So if it comes back, it's largely gonna be a operation where people have the capital investment to bring the cultivars in that are new. And then secondly, the Canadians are subsidizing their bogs.
Mhm.
Because the American bog
Yeah,
market.
so I get there's the whole economics of
Yeah, yeah.
whether or not it makes sense
Right.
for cranberry bog farmers to do it. But in what we're doing it, are we precluding, let's say the economics do work, are we precluding, because it's being put into conservation land, are we precluding it going back into agriculture?
So from a regulatory aspect, the answer is basically yes, you're precluding it. I mean, you know, it becomes new agricultural activity, and that's an entirely different, you know, category under the Wetlands Protection Act. So I think, for all intents and purposes, you should assume that once the agricultural use is gone, it's gone.
Barney, you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the bog house. Is it included in what you're discussing?
No.
Okay. And,
And that's a whole other, you know, a whole other
Okay.
ball of wax, because if the agricultural use goes and it's not an adjunct to some, you know, agricultural operation, you know, I suspect you wind up with another Highland building kind of situation where it's difficult to find a permitted use without substantial upgrade of the building.
Well, it could be affordable housing, I think,
or maybe a co-working space.
or
of some
co-working
sort.
space.
Yeah.
I think there's things that could be used for.
Yeah, so that's not,
It's outside
yeah,
the,
that's
what the
outside the scope
funding
of
Right,
what we're
would be,
looking for.
right.
the
And
plan
but-
would be
but-
developed, okay?
But that would be not precluded, I guess the question is,
No.
it wouldn't be precluded from the plan.
So the land that the house is on would go under conservation? But the bog house would be, or would it be, it would be a building envelope, or whatever you call it, that would not be under conservation?
So, I mean, just to be, I mean, I know we've been using this terminology of it becoming quote-unquote conservation land. What the notice of intent it would do, if allowed, and an order of conditions issued, is simply to permit, you know, the habitat maintenance and enhancement activities in the bog. It doesn't change the legal status of the title to the bog, or the building, or how it was acquired, or anything like that. If the building were to be taken out and put to a different use, there may be some, you know, legal steps that would need to be taken. Maybe the Conservation Commission has to declare that it's surplus to its needs. I mean, but
I'm wondering
we haven't.
If it would be smart
Yeah.
to, do an A&R or some sort of parcel delineation to separate it out so that we don't have that problem down the line, because it's a town asset, and we'd hate to not be able to develop that asset if we saw a need or desire to develop it, because it's suddenly on, you know, land that is not, you know, that's no longer a permitted use. So I would, certainly advocate to have that parceled off.
I'm confused now. Is there an actual change in designation of
Not-
the type of land?
No, not as a result of this notice of intent.
Right.
That's what I was trying
So
to,
that was my question
Well,
though, about is it
that's-
coming out of agriculture? And the answer was yes.
well,
But
it's
it's not
coming out of agricultural use. It
Just
would-
because it's not, there's no agriculture going on?
Yes.
It's ambiguous, and the state will permit some level of ambiguity for some period of time.
Yeah.
But eventually, without agriculture, somebody would declare it no longer agricultural. It's been 3 years now. Hasn't been cultivated.
For cranberries.
For cranberries, right. So it's still agricultural, even though there's been no cultivation.
Yeah, so the state regulations allow, for want of a better year, a 5-year fallow period. And, at some point, somebody might raise their hand and say, well, you can't do that anymore.
Well, I guess what would it be if you didn't do anything?
Forest.
But,
If we just
but
let-
in terms of designation,
Oh,
It's conservation land.
it's
it's
conservation.
conservation.
And a wetland.
Which it is now.
Yes,
Okay.
right, yeah.
And-
No,
and
there's
the
no
flood
None of
zone
that's
and-
changing.
All right.
One way to think of it, it is conservation land, but because there's agricultural use.
Right.
It becomes exempt from many of the regulations that otherwise govern conservation lands.
Understand, yeah, okay.
My understanding from talking to the folks at USDA is they have three kinds of land. There's wetlands, uplands, and land and agriculture. And that's how this gets exempt from some of the
So,
wetlands protection.
as non-agriculture, it just become wetlands.
Right.
Do you have any?
No, I'm on the committee, so. I don't go to
Oh,
every
that's
meeting
true.
anymore, but, yeah.
Okay.
But no, I pretty much know what's going on.
Or, okay,
So,
What would you like from us tonight?
well,
Well,
we were
we were-
responding to a subpoena.
yeah, well, the thing is,
So
this
you
is,
tell us what you want from us.
I'll explain it, this is a somewhat late comer to our
Oh,
list
gotcha,
of.
to the list of warrant articles.
Warrant articles.
Gotcha.
And so, we need to
Agree to
agree
accept
to,
it.
to accept it.
Okay,
Agree to put it on.
gotcha.
Is there anybody that's not amenable to putting it on?
I mean,
Well,
I think-
then,
I think-
I'm amenable to it, but we didn't close it before the warrant? I thought.
No, it
did we
hasn't.
close it? Okay,
The warrant's not closed yet,
okay.
because that's
That's
a
the
vote to
last
close
thing
the
on
warrant.
Remember, keep
Yeah, I
trying
tried-
to close it.
I tried to close it the last time and I was told,
Yeah.
no,
Right.
okay? So, yeah, so, yeah. So we have no opposition to putting it on the warrant, and so it is now currently number, well, it won't be 37
change.
forever because a couple of these others have come off, so it'll probably be around 33 or
We
more.
want to talk about the wetlands bylaw too?
Yes, let's talk about the wetlands bylaw while you're here, because maybe we need to add another bylaw on there. Or
Oh,
not.
no, it's not gonna be ready for this year.
It's not gonna be
No, no,
ready
no.
for this year?
No.
Ah,
No.
okay.
We ran out of time.
You ran out of time, okay.
Okay.
So, we don't have to talk about that. I'll just fill you in, though, that the CONSCOM has been reviewing their, fees and, so they will probably be raising some of their fees. They would like to raise other fees, but they can't do it unless they've changed their bylaw a bit to
Allow it.
well, to differentiate various kinds of, well, I'll let you
Here.
So there are, application kinds of fees that we actually discussed and voted on at our last meeting. The current bylaw has some limitations on, consultant fees, which we think are out of date, and really not appropriate to, managing. So that's one of the items that we're, proposing, and we've been reviewing and drafting a revised bylaw. More generally, I think, the impetus for reviewing the bylaw has been that we spend a tremendous amount of time reviewing applications, and I would tell you that in the almost year now that I've been back on the commission, we've only ever denied one, and it was denied for procedural reasons, not substantive reasons. We had no choice. And it was an eminently approvable project. The problem that we face and why a lot of these things are taking so much time is that there's kind of inadequate guidance in the present bylaw. And so we think we can streamline a lot of the application processes by dividing them into categories and saying, look, if this is what you're doing, you know, presumptively, we're gonna say yes, unless there's some, you know, unforeseen circumstance. But this is what you need to do in advance, so that when these applications come in, we're not sending them back and saying, well, you know, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta, you know, look, it's all there. And so we think we can make the process a a lot more user-friendly. And at the same time, we think there are some areas that are inadequately regulated. You know, the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions and DEP have issued, you know, scientific studies as to what you really should be regulating in the buffer zone that we don't regulate right now, except by agreement with the applicants, because we don't have the authority under the bylaw. So that's another, you know, impetus that we're looking at, so.
Just to add something, we've looked at, you know, dozens of other towns similar in size or nearby us and kind of compared what their local bylaws provide, and, you know, versus, it's, you know, it's supposed to be somewhat more restrictive than the Wetlands Protection Act. That's the point of having the bylaw, and ours is clearly, you know, lacking in a lot of the protection of additional resource areas that aren't protected by the state. So just in becoming, you know, close or similar to what our neighboring towns are doing, that's one of the things we're starting with to look at. But as Alex was mentioning, there's been a lot of scientific research of studies on the effects of wetlands, and so we're incorporating all of that into our planning.
And are you also thinking about, you know, climate change and sustainability and disaster preparedness?
There's a climate change resiliency
Yeah, climate-
aspect.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's something we're looking at as well.
And there's this new program of municipal,
Yes.
design program
Yeah.
that the state has on that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this also, if we were to, I mean, because I think the planning board's not totally 100% ready with theirs. You're not ready with some of yours. I'm wondering if we should be considering a fall, if it would be helpful if we were to consider
I
a
think
fall.
we'd be ready by the fall for certainly.
Rather than have to wait a whole year for this. What do you think, Nathan, about?
I think as long as there's something we can put on a fall that actually draws people to it, I don't think
Yeah.
that
Well,
bylaw amendments are gonna
I
draw
think,
people.
I think
Well-
marijuana might, which is why I was thinking.
Well, we also may have something.
And yet not prolong this other.
Yeah, I don't think marijuana will be the draw, I
You
mean,
don't
unless
think
we're
so?
serving it.
But also the master
why don't we
plan.
Put it in our bylaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The master plan, you know, will be done, the idea is the plan was to be completed in September. So there
Okay.
could very well be some,
So, and then there would be the master plan as well, which then also would dovetail with bylaws, so.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
putting
I mean,
that
I
out
think
there
it's-
because as
Certainly,
part of
if
this.
something comes up that I think it would make sense to do a fall one, and we could get these done.
Yeah,
Well,
I-
it's a possibility, we should probably try to.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is I don't want you to say, oh, well, we have a whole other year, and then we spring this fall thing on you, and you're still not
Yeah.
ready, you
No,
know?
we get about 70% of the way there, and then just the schedule fell apart.
Yeah, okay, well,
For this town meeting, so.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but another part of this bylaw is gonna actually be to, you know, address the fees and structure the fees so they more appropriately account for the time that's spent on these, cause, you know, like some of the quickie filings, somebody wants to take down a couple of trees 80 feet away from the wetland, you know, I mean, that's a pretty straightforward filing, you know, Sylvie goes out, does one visit, she comes back after it's done, does another, boom, but, you know, it's when you have these involved ones where they're close to the buffer zone, or, I mean, close to the wetland, or in the wetland, or they take a tree down and it falls in the, you know, it's all that follow-up, I think that, you know, that absolutely kills the timing, and, you know, and these projects are more complex and they should be charged accordingly. You know, I think you guys are gonna restructure the fees.
What we did this time, we've been in, contact with Luke, because we are, interested and have approval from the personnel for increasing the hours for our administrative assistant, and she also got a grade change. And Luke had said, you know, that you folks seemed supportive of that, but to increase our fees. So the Conservation Commission said, let's increase our fees. And we've been through that process, held a public hearing at our last meeting. The fees have been increased. I guess the lowest increase was 17%, which sort of accounted for the increase in wages from 2014 to now. And the other fees went even higher than that, but.
And those are effective as of yesterday, right?
Yes, it was posted on the website. The first thing I did after we got the thing up was I sent it off to Stamps Getting Married so that they would know. So, they are effective now. And once we come up with our new bylaw, we can look at a more comprehensive review. But this was just to get something in place to increase the fees. It was time, the last ones were done in 2012 or
Yeah,
so.
when I was on the board.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to go through that, and they really didn't want me to spend a whole lot of time on it. So, for something that would be for a year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
because
the,
this would then bump those fees again because of the,
There'll be some structural changes very likely in the bylaw.
yeah, I mean, and even as the fees stand now, they don't really, adequately cover the amount of time spent on most of the filings.
It's one of those things you just don't know.
Right.
It can be the simplest looking project, and something goes afoul,
Right.
and it's totally unacceptable, unanticipated. And then another more complicated project might just go as smooth as anything, but.
Yeah, and,
We
yeah,
had-
so, oh, no.
I was gonna say, we had a filing that took place on a street. It didn't have a direct impact to a wetland. It was, and, there have been all kinds of complications on that one. So I can't count the site visits I've taken out there.
Yeah, and then also, as Alex mentioned, a lot of the other boards have mechanisms to hire consultants. Conscom doesn't necessarily have that.
We have a peer review thing, but.
Right, but like planning board or board of health, just has funds and they'll hire consultants to get in. On the more complex projects, I mean, Sylvia and this board is more than competent. But, it'd be nice if they could have some professional expertise come in as well.
actually, the planning board does not have its own funds. It actually asks its applicants to post a
Exactly.
bond.
Exactly.
And then they return whatever
Right.
funds,
Right.
to.
53G. We have that for
You have
peer
that?
reviews,
Oh.
yes.
So we have the 53G, but under the present bylaw,
Right.
what we can ask is limited, both in amount, and the methodology requires that it be voted on by the commission.
Rather than just being.
Rather than, right. And so, I mean, that's one of the things we wanna change, is look, if it's a certain kind of application, it comes in, it's going
It's
out
gonna
for
have
peer
a
review.
peer review,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and they'll have to post, you'll, yeah, okay. So.
We have a peer review happening tomorrow, as a matter of fact. In the almost 20 years that I've been doing this here, we've denied 3 projects. It's not-
So it's just,
Yeah, but-
you get to compliance through
Right.
the hearing process, but,
Yeah,
there's gotta be a better way to.
yeah.
to-
Okay.
to-
So
you're thinking of.
regarding the fees, I think we've done what you asked, relate to us. Is it possible for the selectmen to address our administrative assistant position at an upcoming meeting?
We will have a staffing discussion later on this evening, is that in that?
Well, you're having a coordination meeting with the finance committee on the
Right.
11th as well.
Yes.
But you meant tonight on the agenda?
No, I don't mean tonight, I mean, that was some
No,
future.
I'm just wondering. Yeah, we will be discussing staffing in general, so
Yeah, so,
it will definitely get discussed.
do you wanna wait to discuss it?
Yeah, because there's
Okay.
several that we discussed.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're sitting here, since it's the next thing.
No, actually, the next thing on the agenda is to vote to close, but what I would like to do is, I'd like to know if we are going to shoot for a fall town meeting, because I think that has some bearing on this warrant.
I don't have any issue with fall town meeting, but as Nathan said, you know, I think,
Well, and that, yeah, but then, Barney said that we may need it, or may want it, or might, for the, master plan.
yeah, no, I think, you know, I think we need to just make sure we know what's lined up before I'll say yay to a town meeting, you know, I mean, I have no issue
Yeah.
having one, but, you know, if the
Yeah.
master plan thing doesn't fall into
On the other,
place.
I mean, it's kind of the
Yeah.
chicken and egg, because, well, okay, you guys are set, but I think, because you're not ready, but it would be nice for you, as soon as we know, we will let you know.
I think the key is, though, if we're gonna push things out, it's just making sure that we're pushing out things that if for some reason there isn't a fall town meeting, it's okay if it's
Yeah,
addressed in the
that's
spring.
right.
Critical.
Right, well, this clearly, their thing clearly is because they're
They're
not
not
gonna
ready.
bring, they're not
Yeah.
ready.
And it
So
seems like
it's
most of these,
mostly-
where the town isn't gonna fall apart if it had to wait, but we could plan on it,
Right,
right?
right.
We do have some momentum on this, so
And so it would help you,
Well,
it's actually
if-
helpful to you
yeah,
because
if-
you don't,
yeah.
you don't die.
Right, yeah.
And I'm just thinking, you know, I don't know why they didn't advance the photovoltaic facilities. Is it just because they weren't ready, or they decided they didn't want it, or for the planning board? You know. Okay. We'll talk about that at another time, and we'll let you know, if we are going to do in October or so.
So procedurally, when do we need to get language for the warrant article?
For this warrant article?
Yeah.
Usually, town council and I will write a draft of the article, so you won't have to provide the language for it unless you've got.
I think I
specific-
sent you at some time ago a simple draft.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, I think we're.
figuring
fine
the
with
town
that.
council would look at it.
Yeah,
Quick answer is we're voting on final language on March 10th.
Okay.
Yeah, but
This is just to include it, yeah.
So it would be helpful if we could, after town council's comments, just to see, make sure it's consistent with what we're
Sure.
looking to do.
Okay,
yeah, this one's
I get
pretty,
that too, yeah.
pretty straightforward.
yeah, I think so.
This is like a 4 sentence.
Compared to-
limit.
Yeah.
No.
Not short for-
Some of them.
It's always in the details, right?
Or not. That's the key with town meeting, less details, when people go back, they go, oh, what was the intent?
I don't know.
So, I mean, I've been back and forth with you about, maybe having a discussion with the selectmen at maybe their next meeting about,
Right, so, well, we're just, sorry, no,
Well-
so, you just wanna wait a minute, and we can start on the staffing? Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're just gonna close out this bit,
Mhm.
so,
And then we're
you
gonna
guys-
be
you guys can
talking about
probably even
staffing.
stay there.
is it okay with you? He's my chauffeur.
Oh, okay.
There's
I'm still not
there's
driving
there's
yet.
Extra charge after
Yeah.
9. You got 6 minutes.
This actually may take a while, right?
This
Staffing
discussion.
or the
No,
closing the
closing
town warrant?
Going through these and,
Yeah, I mean,
in closing, we're gonna wanna make sure that we want them on it, cause
That's
when we
right.
close it, we can't take it off, right?
no, we can take them off, we just can't put any more on.
Right. You,
You can take them off by not moving them.
you don't really need a formal vote if you'll agree that the universe gets no bigger than this.
Yeah.
These are the
Right.
only articles you'll consider, you'll
Right.
finalize the language on March 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
that's a better way
But
to
you
do it.
won't accept
I'd rather
anything
not,
between now and then.
right,
This is it.
Yeah, I just worry about, I
Yeah.
just wanna make sure that, we can have warrant articles that we don't move, but it's really a bad idea, because anybody could then move it.
that's right, which is
And
why
so
I'm,
we just wanna make sure that we don't have anything on, I'm more worried about taking things off of here than
Yeah,
adding.
okay.
about,
Like, I mean, are we ready with, D&E, the, appointed town clerk and a 3-year term for moderator?
We've got language for those already, but yeah.
No, but I meant just more, in terms of, discussion and understanding in town.
Yes.
whip through all these and kind of get
let's go.
a,
Okay, all right.
All right, but we're gonna start with 19, placeholder for Complete Streets Capital Project.
I'm fine with
You
that.
guys have not opened your bids yet, so we don't know.
Thank you.
February seventh.
Thanks, Ken.
That's the 7th.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read through them, stop me if there's one you wanna discuss. The new CETF revolving fund or continuing appropriation.
What's CETF?
Energy Task Force.
Yes, that's something that we
That's something I
still need to
proposed.
discuss.
Yep.
And we still need to have that discussion. It's too bad that we didn't, that Kim is not here to talk about her reservations. Okay, we'll come back to that one. Possible bylaw amendments, personnel bylaw. What do we have on the personnel bylaw?
That was something that you were proposing.
Work on the language.
right?
That was,
The number of
yes.
these, we don't have
I was
language yet.
cleaning it up, we were taking out, the confusing titles and references, making sure that everybody understood that,
Putting
the TA is the
personnel
the
administrator.
personnel administrator, and he will be conducting all of the, evaluations, in conjunction with the, chairs, of the commissions and boards. And
So is this, do we think this is, like an urgent thing, or could we push that to a fall or potentially spring one?
I think it's more urgent than next spring. I would be happy to put it off to fall, but I would not be happy to put it off to next spring.
It's fairly important.
Okay, then I think we should put it in now,
Okay.
because we don't know if there's a fall.
Okay. And we can put it in the fall if we have a fall one. Rescind the
I think
LTCRC
we should
bylaw.
cross that off.
Ah.
Or put it in the fall if we decide to do it, because I do think that there's going to be, I think that there's still a lot of discussion around this, right?
Yeah. So we take this
So
one
I
off,
just think we don't wanna, or just, yeah, I would just take
this
it off.
one, or do it in the
maybe-
fall if
Maybe
we
fall
get
if we
to it.
determine we
get
need
to
to do
it.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I
how
would
would
just
it
hate
work?
to have that hit the warrant article, and
Yeah.
it's just gonna make us look bad if we then don't do it, and
Yeah, no.
it's
I
like, oh,
agree.
you're gonna
It
close
has to
something
be-
else, and then we don't
No,
do
no,
it.
it has to be nailed down.
Yep.
Replace selectmen with select board throughout the bylaws.
Just a question about this, does this mean that we need to present every bylaw and the change?
No, we
No.
got the,
No.
from town
Town
council, we
council's
got
language
his,
was very, brief, and
And
it
he did
basically
not-
was replace the term, board of
Be-
selectmen, or
Search-
select
yeah.
board, wherever it appears
To replace,
Right.
in the town bylaws, and that was.
Okay, so we don't have to show where it appears
No.
or anything like that, like we normally would
Council
have to
says no.
do?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would just make for a very long night.
Yeah,
Yep.
oh my God,
And replace.
yes, okay. Appointed town clerk,
Yeah,
I think is very important to do now if we can.
Yep.
And it's already gonna be too late for the caucus and all this other stuff. 3-year term for the moderator,
yep,
amend the Article 3, officers, boards, and committees.
not sure what that one is.
I don't either
That's-
anymore.
Town council's going through that section
Ah,
of the bylaw.
Yes, I bet, yes.
Again, cleaning up inconsistencies and language that no longer
Okay.
is effective or clear.
Any questions on 21 then? So on 21.
where's 21?
That's the one we're talking about right now.
Oh, back up.
Those are all
this whole
they
There were all
threw out.
these little small
Gotcha, gotcha,
sections.
gotcha.
And we said the personnel bylaw.
Would
no,
stay in.
Would stay in, and the rescind
B.
rescind that one,
Take
okay.
out B.
22, application of bond premiums, that's, Kim presented that to us, last meeting.
Yep.
And we had no problem with that. Establish capital stabilization fund, we had a discussion about it, but I personally think it's a good idea. 24, and that is just to, establish the capital stabilization fund, but not, it doesn't
Fund it.
fund it.
Okay.
Okay, and I guess the question is, did we wanna fund it as well? but that's something we should probably be talking to the FinCom about,
Yeah.
I think,
at our coordination meeting.
I think, yeah.
I think
And
we
with
should
that,
hold
When
off
we,
on
when we,
fire.
when we see what the budget is, we can decide.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and, okay, but the question is, does that require another warrant if we were to fund it, or can we fund it under this
That can be done within the
heading?
same.
Okay.
article.
Raise income tax limit for tax deferral program,
Yeah, the recommendation there is to raise it to, right now it's 40K,
yeah,
and the circuit breaker is now up at 58K. And so they're suggesting to raise it to 58 to 60K to give another year or two of inflation. And at the same time, and it's not on here, but probably also lower their interest rate. Our interest rate is up 8%, which is very
Oh,
high.
it's
And so we-
usurious.
So we should, so
Yeah.
we should bring it down to 3 or 4.
yeah.
Are there standards that we could?
Yeah,
like you
well, we
said
know.
There's
we-
a circuit
we-
breaker, could we just say that we're gonna follow the circuit breaker?
We
Is
could do
this-
that, yep,
Is this something that, you know, it's
Then
kinda
we would
like
have
the
to do it
mileage
every
rate,
year.
right?
Yeah.
right, yeah,
Right.
exactly, yeah.
I just don't know how much that fluctuates, that might hurt us if we,
I don't think it fluctuates much, it's kind of on a standard trend with cost of living and that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
it would seem better to follow a standard than to,
It would,
Yes.
because
yeah,
the next time this is gonna be looked at is 2059.
yeah,
Yeah, good idea.
yeah,
All right?
that's probably a good
So-
idea, yeah.
so
If
that's-
we use
that
the
would
circuit
be
breaker,
in
we
the-
should put it at 58 this year.
No,
yeah.
what we would say
we
is,
take
we don't put
we-
it at anything.
I understand, but if we,
Yeah.
that's what it would be.
Yes,
if we-
yes.
If we
Yeah.
link
Yeah.
it to the circuit breaker.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
So we just need whatever the right
yeah,
language is.
right,
Right.
yeah.
all right. 25 is gone, the proposed fenced-in dog park. 26, accept MGL Chapter 32, S 85H and a half about injured on-duty firefighters. Do we know what that really is all about?
We
We had
Yeah.
a presentation.
we
of that.
discussed this,
Yeah.
with, Chief Fisher,
Yeah.
2 meetings ago.
This says fire chief, but
That
was
says
it fire
fire
chief, or was it with
Oh,
Chief
I'm sorry.
Fisher?
I think it is
It was-
fire
I
chief.
think
It
it
is, I'm
was-
sorry, it was Fire Chief, yes,
was
you're right.
Brian
It was-
Is it
it
the
was
same
Brian.
thing, but is it
Yeah.
the same thing we did for the for the police?
Yeah,
I believe it
Yeah.
is, but
I'll take
I'll
that.
confirm that.
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
Chief Soros.
Sorry, forgotten. 28, revisions, to,
All
okay,
these
the
things we
medical
just
marijuana, and that is something we still could ask whether they want more time, if they really wanna go ahead. Designation of the scenic road,
I'm inclined not to include that until we hear back from them.
Yeah, yeah, we need to get a
okay,
report on that.
well, but, all right. But we're not gonna take it off either until we hear from
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
Join East Middlesex Mosquito Control District, they're supposed to,
we'll know more Thursday.
Well, that's
Another
not
one that,
until
more
yeah.
Thursday night.
Thursday. It's very expensive, and I'd like to know what the FinCom thinks about it. CCRSD Capital Project Parking Lot, 848K,
We get to vote first this year.
Yeah.
yes, we do.
Can't we do 2 of those?
Let the 8th graders park.
We know, so, and they're taking off, the COA is taking off 2 that they thought
Yeah.
they would put on, in order to fund a staff position, or to
Yep.
help
Help fund the staff
fund the
position.
staff
Right.
position. Vanta Davis Telecommunications Tower, we just added last,
And that's just a
Meeting.
lease, right?
that's just
Authorization.
the lease authorization.
and then we just
And,
agreed.
but it's not building the new one.
I think it's
No, it's
replacing
not.
the one that's
It's
there
the-
with the new one.
It's the ground lease.
It's
Right,
your-
remember, we
Ground
talked
lease.
about it last time.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know, but I was
Yeah.
just wondering, okay. And, Conscom request for Cranberry Bog NOI.
Yep.
On there, okay. Thank you.
So what are we saying about the mosquito control? We're gonna
We have to,
vote to leave it on?
we're
and then
leaving
if
it on
we
because
We're not
we
voting
haven't.
find out-
tonight.
We're not voting.
We're not
Oh,
voting tonight.
Okay, good.
But I would,
not
I would not
closing.
vote to put it on.
Yeah, okay. Got it. All right. So
Okay.
we're not voting to close the ATM warrant tonight?
No.
No,
No, we don't need to.
Okay.
no,
Hey,
yes.
Bob has a question.
Oh, hi.
Bob Zelinski,
yes.
82 Acton Street, representing the Mosquito. I've got a question about you dropping number 25. What does that mean?
25
Dog
was.
park.
The dog park, they, the Recreation Commission are going for a private grant and have withdrawn the request for a.
They're not gonna ask for the money.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Bob.
Yes,
Good to see you.
Yeah.
We double team you tonight.
Yes. All right, grants position discussion and discussion of hiring policy.
So should we start with the,
Yes, well, you're here.
You guys are still.
You guys are here.
Mine.
So, you have a position, an administrative assistant position who has been
Twice. She's been approved, well, the position has been approved
Right,
for 35, for, I think, 3 years now. And the grade change to grade 6 has been approved 2 years now. And, there's a lot of work to do. We're a very busy department. And Luke had corresponded with me in the fall, or actually very late fall, that if it might be, if we recommended that we increase our fees, and that the board appeared to be somewhat supportive of this change. And so we've done that.
okay. I just wanna explain, I think our, you can stop me if you think I'm misspeaking, but, if the work has expanded and you need to spend more time doing it and you are charging fees, we felt that the taxpayer shouldn't be subsidizing those, functions. And that's why we wanted those fees to be raised to help defer the cost of that extra time that we understand that you need, whether we were totally sympathetic to, but we weren't wanting to subsidize it if there was another way of paying for it, you know. And then, of course, whatever is not being demanded from those projects, then we would, that's demanded by other parts of the town, then we would pay for that. So we want to just make sure that we understand that those outside pressures are being paid for by the outside pushers.
Right, yeah, the fees should cover the cost of the work and the time that it
Right.
takes to do it. I mean, and obviously, it can't go 100%, right, because obviously there's.
Absolutely not.
Right, there are town
Yes.
projects and whatnot,
Yeah.
but, you know, just a more accurate representation of what, you know, the time that you guys are actually spending on, I mean, like the Deer Committee was a perfect example, right?
Yes.
It, you know, if it takes X amount of hours and you bring in, you know, Y amount of dollars, right, you do your simple division and go, oh, that's not working, right? So there are things like that, you know, I think the bylaw fees are a little more tricky, and I think we all understand that, it's just, you know, if the fees are too low, like, for example, Board of Health, what they did is they said, okay, this is the dollar amount we've gotta make, this is how much, you know, we bring in for a new septic, right? They're a lot more clear cut, right? This is how much we bring in for a new septic, right? We can charge X amount more and bang, that covers our difference, right? You guys are a little different, you know, and I think, you know, just from, you know, my discussion with Sylvia, you know, this initial change will bring in probably about half, about 3,500 of what, the cost increase would be for, increasing the hours and increasing, the grade. So, you know, I think part of the hope is that, you know, when they can do the full restructure, you know, they can bring those numbers in even tighter, and you know, but then, of course, we have the additional request on top of that of a succession plan.
I was just gonna say, I was
right?
gonna ask about the
Which,
succession.
which I think, you know, we're looking for probably, you know, 25 to 30 hour position, that, you know, will not take the place of our administrator, can do a lot of the work that our administrator can do, so that our administrator can go on vacation. But also too, that you know, the office is, you know, fully staffed, competently staffed when people come in and have questions. You know, and I think you guys do as best you can now, but there's an hour shortage, and especially when you have difficult projects that pull you out, it complicates things. So, part of it is, yeah, so obviously the fee change as it stands right now doesn't fully cover, the increase that they're asking for. You know, I think,
At this point, we don't know.
yeah, I mean, you don't know
Because-
exactly,
yeah,
but
and on top of that, some of the fees were actually increased from what I had originally sent you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they
Okay.
were increased Thursday night higher
Oh, even better.
by the
Okay.
board, so I haven't done an analysis yet.
Right, so I think really the next step, we talked and I think they're gonna get close with that, and then maybe there's some creative maneuvering of the existing budget, because really what I think we would like is the line item, the line at the bottom to stay the same, right? Or pretty darn close. And while obviously, there could be half the filings there are this year that there were last year, it's probably not likely, but you know what I mean? There's no guarantee that the funds are gonna come in and cover that exactly. One thing that's different with Conscom is you guys don't have a 53.5. Everything goes right into the general fund. You do have that other one,
We have a 53G, and
53G,
then there's the special fund called the intense account that collects
right.
the Wetlands Protection Act fees, and they have to go, and we already use those to supplement.
Right.
We get 3 hours a week for my assistant's position.
Right, and that's
on
just,
that.
in a sense.
And
not
there isn't
salary.
really any more there to use, I mean,
Nothing more in the 53G either?
oh,
that
the
gets used up?
53G doesn't go to us, it goes to pay for peer reviewers. In fact, there's some funds in it right now that will be paid for peer review that's happening tomorrow morning. And anything that's left over and not spent that's in there that was paid for by the applicant goes back to the applicant. It's not town money.
Okay.
And that's on a 24-acre site on South Street tomorrow. And that will likely be bringing at least one, probably a subdivision road and some lots. I don't know what's planned yet at this point, no way of knowing, but.
Land for sale, some
That's
divisible.
that's
I've seen the sign.
across from Bedfield?
Pardon?
That's the one across from Bedfield?
It's not right across, but
Yeah,
it's
but
on
close,
the,
yes,
it's on the
I got-
opposite
I
side
got
of the
a
road.
sign up there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So I guess I was just, can you give us a little more guidance on the succession plan? What information you're looking for? Is that-
Yeah, so, Sylvia the other day actually sent me kind of, it was at the number 2 in Concord, right? So basically, we're looking for somebody who's more than, in a sense, just an administrative assistant, right? They're really, I think the term is the assistant to the administrator, is typically the phrase used.
And that's what that grade 6 description for that was approved by the personnel committee for my administrative assistant. It was a red line document that I sent you, and that was what was approved, and that does do more than the administrative assistant.
Right,
position.
exactly,
There's a lot of
exactly.
play on words here.
It brings the person along, so they're
Yes,
learning
yes.
all the aspects of, not just whatever they're doing, but they're also learning what Sylvia does.
Right.
So that they
Yeah,
can
yes,
eventually step into her shoes if necessary.
Right, if they so
Or
choose, if she ever
or
retires,
she-
which she better not.
Or if
Um,
she takes a vacation.
Right.
She, we're not,
The work doesn't stop.
the work
Right,
doesn't stop,
exactly.
because we have somebody now who has enough, self-confidence and skills to be able to fulfill that.
I will say that, Mary does a fabulous job when I'm gone, and I was gone almost 3 weeks, not this past summer, but the summer before, and got, a very good report back on everything that she did, everything that I needed to do, and, things went, I think, fairly smoothly, and at least this time a dam didn't break, but that has happened when I've been away on vacation, dams break, and things move along and get picked up all right.
So what's the lesson we learn here? No vacations, right?
Yeah, exactly. No
Well,
vacations for
actually,
some-
I did
No, no,
have-
and I think.
Remember to report that to our benefits
Right.
committee.
Yeah, no, and the point here is that, you're not necessarily changing a position so Mary doesn't have a job, right? I mean, you're modifying a position so, one, the individual in that position gets compensated accordingly, but also two, that, they really meet the needs. Because the problem is we're a small town, we can afford 2 people in every group, planning board has 2, Board of Health has 2, you guys are gonna have 2. We can't afford that third, right? So you really need the number 2 to be competent enough to do most of what the number 1 can do. And then, as Kate said, if Sylvia ever decides to retire, or, Sylvia will retire at some point, and then we gotta think down the road, right? There's gonna be another Sylvia who will stay on for 20+ years. But then you wanna have that continuity, right? And we just don't have that in any department right now. Maybe police and fire, but.
I will say the job description that was approved by the Personnel Committee, there's a lot on there that isn't in the current position, that she actually does. So, I mean, that was one of the reasons for getting the approval for the.
So are we, I'm not sure what we're being asked to do, both approve the new description?
Well,
The
the
funding
Personnel
level.
Committee already did that. The question is whether or not the extra hours and grade change could be approved for this coming
Be
year.
funded, right, it's the funding
It's the
piece,
funding,
so.
okay.
Right,
Yes,
so,
this is
So
what-
we've been moving since, last spring to get to here, and I don't know why it's taken this long, but it has.
money. It all boils down to money.
Well, so that comes down to, so do we know how much money
So
we're talking
now-
about?
Yes, that's.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think it may make sense to do a larger presentation down the road, and I think we should probably talk, a little bit more before then. But I think it was like 7,000 without the grade change, just the hours, right? And then like 7,400 with the grade change and the hours.
I need to get you the
Yeah.
real numbers.
Yeah,
I
but-
worked some out sort of back of the envelope.
Yeah.
And gave them to Luke.
Yeah.
But I didn't speak with Priscilla yet to get an exact number of
Yeah.
days that we're talking about, because I was just trying to get sort of the ballpark.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
So
no,
we
that's
would like
why-
to have that, we'd also like to have what you kind of guesstimating, you're gonna be, difference that you're gonna be
Right.
bringing in with your fees.
It will be a guesstimate.
And what the, yeah, and we understand, and what the delta would be.
Yeah, and well, and I think too, as we can maybe look at the budget too, and, I know there's not a lot of wiggle room in it. But, I mean, maybe there are ways that we can constructively work within that budget too, to just say, because really, we gotta think of this as really just a one-year fix, right? Sort of stopgap, right? But basically, like a one-year solution, and then, with the bylaw changes and with all of that, then we'll have to readdress, exactly, where that money comes from, right?
And there may be, we don't know, but I know there is discussion about reorganization of the land use committees and staff.
Right, so that's a whole
altogether,
other-
so
that's a whole other ball.
who knows, the whole thing might.
So I don't get what you just said, Luke. So what we're doing is,
Why do you call it a stopgap?
yeah, I mean, you
Because-
can't change their hours, I mean,
No,
It's
right.
not a stopgap, it's,
Well,
we're funding it.
It's a change.
Right, it's a change,
Permanent
but it's.
change.
Right, so it's a permanent change for the current position. Right?
Yeah.
That position is going to change when we do the succession plan, right? So we may say that the position is 30 hours, we may say that it's 35, depending on how we actually wanna, and obviously it'll be a discussion with Conscom as well. Exactly what do we need in that position? And then the other, factor that's gonna play in is the bylaw is gonna change, right? And, well, perhaps the bylaw is gonna change, right? Because it still has to pass town meeting, right? So, if it ends up being where, we try to implement all these fees based on different difficult filings, and town meeting says no, that's a burden that I think the board's gonna have to bear, right? If town meeting says no, we don't agree to any of these changes, right? We like everything the way it is, which has happened in the past.
But Tommy's not voting on that.
No, but they're voting on the bylaws. No,
Okay, well, that's
yeah.
different.
Right, so, but if you
bylaws-
structure the fees based on the bylaws,
Yeah.
right, you kinda have to go back to the drawing board, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a way to do it, but again, we're gonna be in the same boat where, the fees that are charged for a certain type of filing, may not always represent the amount of time spent on that filing.
Can we,
Can
can
I-
we just go back though for a second and,
Sure.
I'm a little confused about what is the issue at hand right now?
I'm confused too, as to what we're being asked to decide.
Yeah,
No,
so,
nothing right now, so,
well, wait, so
The-
what,
Well, I don't mean right now,
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Back, you'd like to be on another agenda,
mm-hmm,
you would like a costing of, yes,
Right.
okay.
For,
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Luke, because I had this conversation with you this morning, and what I had understood was that there's an adjustment of fees now, which will create a certain delta between that new position and, what they can afford to contribute to that new position and what we would need to kick in. But they would like to increase the fees even more based on a different bylaw structure, and which would then probably, which could possibly help that
Offset
delta.
that.
Offset that delta, that delta. So this is, this.
But have we already,
Is that-
is
That's
the,
correct, yeah.
the increase in the cost, based on the increased hours, is that currently in the proposed budget for CONSCOM that the finance committee is working with? Are you saying there's gonna be an additional expense that you want us to approve, that then, and are you going to FinCom as well?
Well, so this is the whole thing, you know, we need to approve it, right?
We being the
Yes,
board.
we-
Being the
Selectmen,
board, right?
yes.
So I think this is where we've gotten into trouble in the past, is people will tell FinCom, or FinCom will tell people, sure, we support this, and then they'll come to us and say, well, FinCom supported it, but we're the ones that make the financial decision.
Yeah.
Not FinCom. I appreciate all the support and
Yeah,
everything that they do,
yeah.
I'm not knocking it, but ultimately, we're the final decision makers, right? So, over the past few years, I think it's been approved by us, but it hasn't, we haven't figured out a way to make the money work. So right now, it's an increase in, how many hours? It's 5 or 7 hours is the ask.
So she is now at 30 hours.
Yeah.
With 3 of them paid for by the wetlands.
Yeah, but it's 30 to
Protection
35,
Act.
right?
So it would be under the general fund, it would be an increase to 32 hours with 3 being picked up by the intense account to make the 35. So
And
But
the,
it-
and the,
Five
and the
more.
grade-
Goes from
and the
30
grade-
Five more
It's 5
hours
additional hours.
coming out of
So
the town
The
budget.
complication is that we were advised to increase our bylaw fees. We have done that.
Yeah,
The issue is they go to the general fund.
right.
So we don't accrue those unless they're part of some
Unless they're
53E.
put into
But
their
we
budget.
don't have a 53E. That's
Mhm.
told by Luke that you folks are planning to perhaps remove. the
Well, that's a
53E.
much larger discussion. No,
Yes.
so,
Yes.
so whether or not it goes into a fund or the general, the general fund or 53E and a half is, right now, the increase in fees is about 3,500. The back of the envelope calculations, about 3,500. The back of the envelope calculations for the position change is about 7,500, 7,400, right? So there's
So we're on
a
the
delta
hook
of about
for-
4,000.
We're
right?
on the hook for 4K.
Right, and I think there's probably a way to creatively move some money in their current budget, right? But I don't know if we're gonna get to that full, so I think we just need to finish our discussion before.
And figure out
So
that
the-
amount.
So what we're funding is an increase in hours and an increase in grade, is that
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's- okay.
Yep.
All then we need to know is how much money does it take to do that?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And
Yes, we're-
I can get that.
Right, good, yep.
That I can get.
Yeah.
What's wishy-washy is what kind of funds would come in from the bylaw fees.
Right.
Go to the general fund, and how to recognize if that is an adequate compensation to the town.
Right.
Yep.
And because we don't have access to them.
But you have an estimate.
Right, exactly, much like Board of Health, I mean, they could have
Sure.
half the
Yeah,
number
they
of
don't know.
septics as.
We
We
yours,
can
right?
track it within the general fund
Right.
without any problem.
Yeah,
It can be
we
tracked
track
there,
it
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not an
Yeah.
issue.
And the accountant can track it too, so, yeah,
Right, exactly.
Right.
Technology is wonderful.
isn't it? Yeah.
All right,
Makes sense?
so we don't have to vote on anything
No.
relative
No,
to
no.
this tonight.
No.
You're gonna bring it back, when you have a,
Next agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can pull something together, and I can try to call in, as well, but I think, I think there's a way to make it work, I honestly do. We just have to sit down and actually,
We're very busy.
couple hours, yeah, well, I have a job too, you know, I mean, so,
No, I'm
it's
just
one of
saying-
those things
just
where.
trying to say, you know, there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think anybody is, you know, denying the fact that, you know, you need the hours. I mean, I think everybody needs the hours. It's just, you know, I think we can make this work. We just need to sit down and, you know, hash it out exactly and then present it and boom, boom, boom. I mean, it'll be fairly clear cut, or either you make it or you won't, right? But I think we can get pretty darn close. Uh-oh.
All right.
All right, time
Okay,
to move along.
we're gonna move along.
Thanks you all,
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank you very much.
thanks.
Okay, well, that's not the only staffing discussion we have.
Nope.
Well, right?
COA?
Is that the only
CYA?
staffing one we're having tonight? I mean, are we, because it says staffing discussion. We have the other hiring policy, but that's a different subject.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really a matter of the board's priorities. I mean, there was some desire to support the Board of Health and the Council on Aging last time, and we had.
Yes.
And that ask has been decreased.
Right.
Right.
Board of Health is.
Right.
zero.
Board of Health has gone to 0 and COA has gone down to 10.
Right.
Yeah, is it 10 or is it?
It's 10.
Okay.
Right.
I met with them
Okay.
last week.
Yeah, because we didn't have a firm number,
And,
so, yeah.
Yeah, well, they were talking 12 originally.
Yeah, yeah.
And we said, 10 is a nice round number.
Yeah.
There's no question the work is there.
Right.
That population is dramatically increasing.
Mhm.
And we don't have accessible within the town expertise where you just call in a professional consultant to handle the problems these people are having, so it has to be handled by the COA.
Yep.
And they may be overdoing it, I don't know, and I've talked with them about that.
Yeah.
But there certainly is sufficient justification for those hours.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about other folks, well, I know Bernie, you keep forwarding, but, you know, there's been significant feedback in the community about support for.
Yes, well,
Really
that's to be
too.
expected, but it's.
Yeah,
but-
yeah, they're
right,
good at
still,
organizing the constituency, but,
Yeah.
you
Right,
know,
yeah.
it's also
So,
reasonable,
But
yeah.
but
But it's still important.
yeah, the-
So why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, why should
Yeah.
they lay back and say, well, we'll just wait
Right.
for people to do things
And
for us?
and frankly, it's not a lot of people who are creating the time demands. It's often a couple
Oh,
of
yes,
people.
Yes, yeah.
But it's impacting police, it's impacting fire,
Mhm.
and EMS. And I think it's at a point where, we can't just say, suck it up anymore.
So I have a request. So, you know, we started this way back, I think in November, right? Where we first went through and we said, yeah, we're gonna do this, no, yeah. Would it be possible for us to just get a spreadsheet of all the positions and
Sure.
what we said initially?
It's easy what we said initially, no.
And because some of them we're revisiting, and I just wanna make sure that we need to look at that big picture again and make sure that we're not creating any other problems, because we were very careful about why we said no to things. And I think that there's some, you know, creative ways of trying to fund everything, but that brings me to my next thing that I wanted to say, which is, I just want us to be really, really careful that we're not looking at these fees and these revolving funds, or whether it's going to general fund or whatever, as just a way of paying for the positions if other things are being squeezed out because of that. And so I think we just need to be really, really careful about that. But also, a question that I had for Tim was, is there a way that we can actually tie the hours to the funds that are coming in? And, you know, so what I worry is what happens all the time, right? Is people come in and they say, hey, I'm gonna pay for this out of this fund that I have, or, hey, I'm gonna get a grant, it's not gonna cost the town anything. You know, 3 years from now, they're gonna be back, and they're gonna wanna put it into their general fund. I mean, that's just the way it happens. And so if there's a way that we could tie it, then I would feel a whole lot more comfortable for it, because as it stands right now, I'm not very supportive of these unless there's a way we can make sure that this is the way that it works, and it can't change. If their fees incomes goes down, they're gonna have to cut back on hours, right? I mean,
Well, we will have to ask them to support, I mean, we've approved these fees and we've approved the increase in hours on this based on what you told us the traffic would bear, okay?
Right, but is
because you're
there a
gonna
way
have-
to make that
Because you're
kind of
averaging
more-
22 new septic systems a year, if we only get 10,
Right.
okay, then everything drops in half.
Right, but is there a way to like formalize that? Because, you know, we're here for only 3 years, there's, you know, people transition on this frequently, like every year. We're not gonna be here then, and there, you know, there will be Board of Selectmen members here saying, oh, well, of course we'll have to do that, and then boom, the budget goes up.
Yeah, because also, we don't, or maybe you do this, Kate, or maybe you and Alan, but there's no, sort of, the board as a whole doesn't receive a financial report periodically, or any accounting of,
We do it annually,
Things-
well, we're supposed to get it annually.
right, but I'm just saying,
We
there's
talked about
no
that.
kind of,
You do get it
there's no
annually. You have
yeah,
to
we
say,
do get it, but there's no
Priscilla
tracking
was
along the
offended
way.
at the
Now, maybe the
front. Didn't go
FinCom
out.
gets it, I don't
No.
know, but, Tim, is there any,
There-
sort of quarterly way to just look at the quarterly, you know, I don't know
Year to
that.
date.
They report, yeah, financial reports are available monthly by department, so,
But
Yeah,
it
but-
seems to me it should be something that you, as town administrator, I would assume, would be looking at, or maybe you and Kim, right? And you see, oh, this line is out of whack, or this line is way under what we thought, and that should be fed to us, don't you think? Or some, I don't.
I wanted, no,
No,
I
I mean,
did
it
not
goes-
talk to this woman about this, but you are saying exactly what I said at our financial planning meeting this morning. And I told Kim that, I said, you know, I would like to have a dashboard financials sort of report coming more regularly than annually.
Yeah.
And I was told, well, it's available, it's like, well, I don't care if it's available, I want it presented to me, you know, on a regular basis, so we
I
see
think it
year
goes
to
out.
dates.
I mean, I
and
think
what
it
do you
goes
try-
out
what
on
are you
a
thinking?
monthly basis. I mean, it goes to the chair of the selectmen, chair of the finance committee, myself.
Could it
We
once,
do get that.
could
It
once a
go to
month
everyone.
be included in our packet once a month?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Then let's just do that.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all, and I remember
Not for just
Carrie,
our funds, but for the whole town.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
I remember Carrie Kissinger asking it for that as
And,
well.
you know, Tim, I think part of that is, at least for me, I'm not familiar with all the specific ins and outs of the town budget, and, I'm not necessarily gonna understand, you know, looking at one particular section, the significance of it, so I do think it would be really helpful to have you and Kim looking at those before the Board of Selectmen meeting, where we're gonna see that monthly report, and just, you know, saying, you know, you should give a little attention to this section, and here's why, because either we're way, better than we thought we were gonna be, or we're overspending where we thought, you know, something that
Yeah,
is,
no.
from
It could
a
be-
professional's point of view, how to make sense out of what we're seeing. What is that showing us?
Revenues, for instance, on
Yeah.
fees have fallen below.
Yeah.
Our anticipated.
Or
level.
the, you know, suddenly the recycling market has changed significantly, and we're getting X amount of money in. I mean, that's such a teeny thing, but you know what I mean? Or that the school,
Millions.
you know, the school has received 5 new students, all of whom require, you know, X special services.
Well, that you're
And we
not
have to
privy to.
increase,
That,
don't we get we don't get noticed, we don't get any information
We can
from
see
the
their
school
budget.
committee?
From the school, it's more on a bottom line basis with the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
department.
But at the
But-
line item though, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can see it, but yeah, we don't have any real,
Well, we can see it though.
you can see it.
We can go ask them if we want.
We can ask them what it
Yeah.
means.
We're citizens.
I wouldn't wanna be,
I'll talk to Kim and Priscilla about
yeah,
presenting that to the board. Over the past several months, it hasn't happened on maybe as regular a basis as it did in the past, but you know, we can make that directly available to the board.
And then just
This-
put
and I,
it on
and
the
I wanted,
agenda for
I don't want
few
a
minutes.
lot of, personally, I don't know, maybe you guys might want more detail. Don't wanna be in the weeds, I don't want every single
No,
line item.
Jesus, no.
I want categories, I
Right.
want revenue in, revenue out,
Well,
you
once
know.
we see it,
Yes,
let's
okay,
see one, and we can
let's-
decide
okay,
whether it's
okay.
accurate or not.
Yeah,
All right.
there you go.
Yeah, and I honestly, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I honestly think, so some boards are fairly self-sufficient, right? So I think Board of Health is, I think, you know, John Mativir, I think, you know, I think those boards bring in a lot of fees. I think Conscom, for example, you know, I think they brought in $16,000 worth of fees last year, right? Clearly doesn't cover the salaries. But there's additional stuff that they do, right? Managing all the open space that the town has chosen to, right? So there may be a way to kind of, you know, rob from the rich and give to the poor. You know, and if, you know, one department kind of ebbs and flows, you know, then, you know, maybe that's a way that they get covered in a year.
Well, that's,
right?
you
Or-
do that by deciding what is fee-based and what goes into the general fund.
Yeah, exactly,
I mean,
exactly. So I think
you
it's-
distribute the wealth in the general fund.
Right.
If you're running a board that can be sustained by fees they charge, then that's a good way to fund it.
Exactly,
It'll go to the
exactly.
general fund.
Right.
And it's really pretty simple.
Yeah.
Right, but what I'm saying too is that, you know, you gotta look at it overall as well, right? Like, you know, we need a Conscom, we need a Board of Health, we need these, right? But if ultimately you see that, you know, the fees are way down because they don't have the filings, whatever department it may be, then yeah, maybe you decide to cut back, right?
Or,
If the police department doesn't get funded by parking fines, you know.
or, you know, or the other part of that is, which is what, Madeline was
Yes.
presenting in her, you know, initial thinking about the land use groups, is, maybe it's the staff time that's now available in one department to do work in another department, or to cross, you know, or collaborate or whatever, so that you make that part of town hall just work more efficiently.
Oh, yeah, no, I
Right.
couldn't agree more with
With-
that. That is
yeah.
gonna be very hard to implement though. You
I know,
and
but
you're
I
working with each of these boards, and I'm
I
not saying
know.
we shouldn't do it and we can't do it. There's just gonna be a lot of resistance, so we've gotta be ready for that as a board, you know? And
And I think it's gonna come out in the master plan, in a bigger way even. There's a lot of interesting stuff that the consultant is just, you know, from a very quick, this was, you know, a couple meetings ago, but looking at the way, the town boards and staff function, which is not as sort of an overall coordinated team, right? It's very much.
siloed.
Yeah, and I think there's gonna be compelling evidence for making those hard choices and moving in a more coordinated, organized, structured, way of operating town government, where there are shared goals and shared priorities, and then there are people with different skill sets, right? But it's not gonna, I mean, I'm really both excited, and I know it's gonna be difficult, but I'm really excited to think there could be some major efficiencies from all of that.
Yep.
So,
But, and I think we need to be also aware that Tim is going to
Yeah,
have
I
to be
think we gotta
kind
say
of the leader of that new team.
that's right.
And we may need to be finding help
Each staff is so tiny.
for Tim and Jen,
Yeah,
or
or somebody's job description changes a
You
little
know.
bit, right, to provide some.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot to think about.
okay.
You know, and just, I gotta throw this in there. Another thing we've really gotta focus on too is, you know, we pick a $2,000 here, $5,000 there, but, you know, the school budget is huge.
Yes.
So a
Oh, yeah.
2% increase,
I-
2.5% increase to the school budget, you know,
Yes,
we,
yes.
you know, we knock that down to 1%, we could wipe out all of these other
Yeah,
concerns. You know what I mean?
so,
Yes.
that's,
I always feel like this side
that's the elephant
of
in the room.
of the government is scrounging among the couch cushions looking for quarters, while the school is sitting on the cushion.
Yeah, and
So
it's not to.
you know, I know this is a big, much broader discussion, but I think we need as a board to figure out a different way of, and I know there's some, you know, legal issues there and bylaw issues, but I think we can't just keep having it work out, have the relationship be what it is
Yes.
now. I think it's gotta change.
I think we get involved too late in the process.
We do, and I was,
You know, I think that we need to be we need to be driving what the guideline memo says.
Yes, I agree with that.
You know, and I know that we were saying this, you know, months ago, but we need to drive that, we need to drive what we're looking for as a percentage increase, and anything beyond that has to first come to us for review before they even, you know, I think at this point, it's kind of like, I'm not sure how we got to 2% with the school, but we haven't talked about whether or not we agree to 2%
They
for
started
the
with
school.
a 3.5%.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
I know, I'm just
how, you know,
saying.
it's like, the school budget has not been increased 2%, right? I mean, because we still need to weigh in on it.
Right.
Now, what we always wanna try to do is go in unison, right? You
Right.
know, so
Yes.
it wouldn't be good if the FinCom was saying, we think it should be 2, we don't support a
Right.
0.
Right.
Or a 1, or whatever it is. But a 2% increase on the school budget is massive.
It is, and
And, you know,
I
and
may
we
not
haven't
have
had
done
the
it well,
discussion.
but I
We-
tried to open those discussions up when I talked about analysis of what would it look like with a 0%, what would it look like with 1%,
But we
and
need to have those discussions
that went
also here
nowhere.
as a Board of Selectmen, because
Right,
you don't,
right.
you know, alone, you don't represent the Board of Selectmen, so we
Right.
need to, you know, be
Yeah.
driving that as a board, and make sure that it's understood where we're
Right.
expecting it to be. Because I think, you know, I hope they don't think that we've approved it, right?
Yeah.
Because we haven't.
no.
And the thing is
I
too,
want to
you know,
hear
we,
about the LTC, because I wanna know what happened to the 80K that they usually
We
had.
didn't get very far on that at all.
Okay.
no, but the other thing too is like, we don't, you know, we can say, here's X amount of dollars. We can't tell them how to spend it,
No,
right?
we're not,
However, let them make the decisions on how to spend it. And if they
Yes.
spend it foolishly, shame on them. You
right.
know, it's not,
Exactly.
you know.
Well, and they'll get a lot of pushback.
Exactly, right, and I think we saw when we did the contract negotiation, you know, I mean, folks that I talked with, you know, and throughout town, you know, people with kids in the school, not in the school, you know, they all understand the school is a big ticket item, you know, and 2% or 4% or whatever percentage you wanna put on a salary is a real dollar amount. And, you know, we just can't do it, you know, as a town, we just can't sustain, you know, I don't wanna say not paying attention, cause we pay attention, but the status quo, you know,
Right, we
well, it's
just
been
can't
2.5%,
continue,
so.
right.
Cause our growth isn't that, you know,
Right,
and,
right.
you know.
I think some fundamental questions have to be asked, right? I know, Kate, you and I have talked about this going back to last May. You know,
I've been talking about
I
it
think
forever.
that the chair and the vice chair of the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen and the school need to get together and, not saying we're cutting the budget, but do a what if, right? I mean, we're getting to the point where, you know, we may start really getting some pushback on this, and, because every 1% just gets a bigger and bigger number, right? And we're.
Probably things on a percentage basis.
So,
Right, and so, you know, I think that we need to have the chair and the vice chair of each of the committees sit down and just do some soul searching about, well, what would happen if we cut it X amount, or X amount, or X amount? You know, what, you know, let's not do the typical, you know, public budgeting, well, of course, then we'll have to cut the, you know,
Yeah,
all the.
the library.
The scary,
library will
right,
go-
The
the
thing is,
threats.
though, just one little bit of clarity, it's not a cut, it's a smaller increase.
Yes,
Yeah,
no.
so that's another thing, so, you know, we
Right.
tend to use the term cut, as oh, we're
Right.
cutting the budget, you know.
Well,
to-
no, but I
to
was
2%.
actually, that's not correct, because I was actually saying,
Oh, you
what
want-
if we were to cut it?
Oh, you wanna cut it, okay.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
and then what if, you know, and then what if they
Look
increase
at
it? You know,
some-
just like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
just do
yeah,
the
look at
scenario.
well,
some
actually, a
scenarios.
non-increase is a sort of a cut, since if the, is a 2% cut in certain respects, since the teachers are getting 2%. And not,
Right,
the
so
zero
they'd have to-
increase is a
they'd have
cut.
to
Yeah,
decrease
it's
somewhere
a
place
cut
else.
in services.
Yeah, but I can
Yeah, but-
tell you that when we were going through that, we were saying, we're not increasing your budget 2% because of this.
Right.
Right,
We
exactly.
were very
Going through
clear.
the contract negotiation.
Right, we were very clear,
Uh-huh.
this does not mean your budget's going up 2%.
Yeah.
Right, 'cause that agreement's through the school, with the school committee and the teachers, you know, we
Yeah.
were there as the money folks, right?
Right.
Saying,
And they heard what we said, because they were
Yeah.
saying it, right?
And so, I'm sorry,
then
who is
the
they?
Final,
the school committee.
School
people who are
committee
on the-
heard that.
well, the people who were on the,
Okay, oh, I wanted to
Yeah.
understand.
Representing the
who
bargaining-
the antecedent
yeah,
is.
I just wanna
Yeah.
finish what I'm trying to say.
I know, but I had.
Um,
understand what you're saying.
well, now I've forgotten it.
I'm sorry.
Uh-oh.
Well, you were saying that they understood that.
Well, no, I was talking more about the budget, the other thing is just taking a step back and talking about, like, we really want to have a top school in the state, right? We really wanna have that. What does it take to do that? So, in other words, is our incremental spending for new programs, or, new hours, or new math teachers, or new, whatever it is that moving the needle for us to be a better school, or are we just spending the money?
We can't answer that.
They can't.
Well,
answer
we
it either.
can't, but that's their business, right, is understanding program and
Well, of course they'll
education.
say
and-
it's to make it a better school.
Yeah, but only at what point, like, if we're number two, do we wanna be number one? So do we wanna spend the money to make it a better school to get number, what's our goal?
Well, it's to provide the best possible education for the students. I mean, you
Well,
know,
but
that's.
then that's unlimited spending, right?
No,
No, it's not, but it's I mean, in the teaching world, you're trying to figure out what are the best practices, and figure out how you can implement those in your particular school system, and what it takes to do that. And it's not about, like, the college, the listing of the top 10 colleges in whatever it is, US News and World Report. I don't think anybody on the school committee would say, oh yeah, our goal is to get to be the number one in the state. But it is one of the ways that the school system is evaluated, is through all this testing. And do we want to be in the top 10 the way we are now? Probably the answer is yes.
But you go
right?
to first day of, you go to parents' first day at the high school, and their presentation is all about what
Yep,
rank they
yep,
are
yep.
for a state.
But if you
as
talk
part of
to
the
the
regional school district,
right.
which is all part of our school.
Right, but if you talk to the administration of the elementary school here, that is very specifically something they say is not what drives their decision-making. Yeah, I mean, I really can say that from both firsthand knowledge, being a teacher there, but also from this visioning committee that I've been participating in. And it's never been the ethos of the school, of the elementary school, that it's all about the testing and where you end up, in the state rankings. It's really much more about the quality of the teaching staff and the curriculum and best practices, and understanding that you need to adapt and change as we learn more, we do more research, and as the student population changes.
So then how do we then, or is it at all possible to measure what the impact on that is at various funding levels?
probably not.
Well, I don't know, it's an interesting question. One of the things, I'm not sure how these all interact, but, there are some changes right now occurring across the country around teaching methodology and grouping of students. And, our traditional way in this country has always been by age, right? And then you're in a classroom based on your age, and the classroom typically is an enclosed space. That our school, because there are some really strong, both teachers and administrators, I think, who are trying to, be familiar, make sure they're aware of these changes, and also thinking about our school and what that would mean for the school. They're seriously looking at, particularly for the older grades, changing that way of teaching. And so instead of grouping people by their age into a particular class, you're doing it much more and you're taking down walls, and you're doing it much more by groupings
Oh
of
my God,
kids.
we did that in the sixties.
I know you're thinking of the open classroom, but it still was by age. This is very different, and it's
Yeah.
really, you know, from an educational standpoint, it's happening. It's gonna happen across the country.
And then it'll
And,
change back.
And then.
well, I'm not sure it will, because of, a lot of the changes in
Yeah.
both,
When I was in elementary and high school, there were no age restrictions.
He went to a one-room schoolroom.
Everybody went to school together.
well, look how smart you are, see?
It was a horrible one, I almost flunked out of college.
Well, I mean, this is a part of a much
Well,
more
well,
bigger
What I
philosophical,
worry
but you're
about
trying to
is-
get
What I
at,
worry about is,
right.
as this number goes from 11 million to 12
Yeah,
million.
yeah.
And we're still doing 2%.
Yeah.
We're gonna make this town go
Well,
bankrupt. if
right,
that's
yeah,
all.
But
well,
Nathan,
because-
there's a simple way to do it, if we had the courage to do it. And that is, you say, okay, we're gonna have a 1% increase in the tax base this year. Okay? So we're gonna, and we don't so everybody is gonna get 1%. Okay? We don't care how you spend it, you decide that. All we're gonna appropriate $34,375,222.19. And we're gonna divide it up in the same percentages that we did last year. Live with it. We don't care how you spend it. You can spend it
what
on
we would do
salaries,
is-
you can spend it on Cadillacs.
What we would do is spend all of our time on that 19 cents, right?
And-
Because that's what we do.
And by the way, so would town meeting.
Right.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
No,
No,
so,
but I
and that's
think
what
that-
I was suggesting at the very beginning of
I
this
know.
whole thing, is we need to be involved in
Yeah.
what the guideline
yeah,
is.
Yes.
And, and, whatever that increase is,
it should
although I think the
originate,
guideline was 0, wasn't it?
Yeah, which didn't happen.
Which didn't happen. Why?
right.
Well, so then we need to ask, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's
And-
what we need to discuss with the FinCom when they come next
Yeah.
time.
And I
Why?
think we also need to put in front of everybody the notion that this summer, they're gonna be the discussions you're talking about between the school committee and the FinCom chair and vice chair and the
Mhm.
Board of Selectmen, right?
You and
That
I tried some of that.
No,
Okay,
but I think in a much more organized way,
Yeah.
yes, it's not, dollars and cents at that point, but it's the fundamental discussion about what is sustainable
And so
here
you
in
guys,
town.
you guys
and-
talked to the school committee about this?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it
So
needs,
these are
I
types of
talked-
things that, we should talk about as a
At the very
board.
beginning, last summer, I had a conference with, of course, at that point, it was Melinda Gambino and Christine Lear. And I said I thought it was gonna be a lean year, and I wanted to talk to them and, see if we could get things kicked off, in an amicable way, because I didn't want us to be in conflict, and that I was hoping that they would be, and then I also brought up the fact that I had understood that there had been some prepayment of some sped the year before, while they were asking us to fully fund their elevator. So they were spending, what I considered to be, excess and deficiency fund, and then making us, asking us for additional funds as well. And that I thought that that was not gonna be sustainable. And the answer basically that I got back was, well, and I said, the taxpayers are starting to push back, they feel that taxes are getting too high. And they said, well, but the schools are what keeps those property values, high. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And I also said that I thought that the school committee needed to be aware that they needed to advocate for the schools to us, but they also needed to advocate for the town as a whole, to the administration, to keep budgets, reasonable, because they're not elected by just parents, they're elected by the entire town. So, that was my spiel. Now, while I was at the MMA last weekend, I did happen to take one of the breakout sessions called Creative School Financing. And their suggestion, and it's not like our problem is unique, it's all over everywhere. And their suggestion is that the TA,
Comments.
have regular conversations with the school superintendent, that is peer-to-peer. And that level is almost more important than us doing with the school committee, that you would need to be explaining to the superintendent where the town stands financially, what the big picture looks like, what the problems are on the town side. Because that's the place to start. Because he is the one that puts the budget together for the school committee.
This is why I just think if it's,
But I'm just-
I think that if it's a Board of Selectmen sponsored chair, vice chair with the other vice chairs, I think he can go a lot further, because then it's, hey, the Board of Selectmen, they wanna talk about this.
Yeah, but I think also that the
Or you may do them
peer-to-peer,
both, yeah.
I think you have to do both of them. And it had never occurred to me to do the other part.
Mhm.
So I think it would be certainly something worthwhile trying. Another thing to put on your list of things to do.
Well, the,
And the other thing we learned at Maya was that or at the MMA is that what the real health insurance costs increases were,
Oh.
and retirement costs and those
Yes,
kind of things. Yeah.
Yes, and that, yes.
just one other point, I think that the feedback that we're getting from the kitchen conversations that are happening all over town for the master plan, you know, we've got, I think, 60 of them scheduled, and even if you figure it's 10 people in a group, some of them have been bigger, you know, that's 600 people. And, the school comes up in one of the questions. So I think we will get quite a bit of feedback too, from the notes that are being submitted back to the steering committee from all these conversations, so.
The schools.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, the high school doesn't get talked about as much, but yeah.
yes.
right.
Well, because we don't feel we have as much, all
Right.
right. I don't know if we have time to discuss hiring policy, well, we're done with staffing discussion. Well, for now, discussion of hiring policy, I put on there because I am anticipating upcoming, you know, staff changes. We might be hiring a town clerk at a certain point. We might be having a new, you know,
Planning
DPW
board.
head. We might be having a new, you know, we know we're
Yeah.
gonna have a new planning board head. And, before we engage on any kind of searches and hiring and, what do you call it, interviews, I think I would like to have a discussion about our policy around giving preference to any types of groups. For instance, do we give preference, will we be giving preference to veterans, disabled, diversity, residents, staff? And I would like us to have that kind of, discussed and agreed upon, and possibly even codified in policy before we embark on the search, so that we don't have things cropping up, as we had with, well, for instance, the, fire chief, where, you know, the kind of residency trumped all, and it was kind of a surprise to some of us that, so, I'm just putting that out there
Okay.
for thought and reactions, and we may not,
I think having really clear understanding as to like what the requirements are is really, really important. I think we just need to be really, really careful around what those requirements are and make sure that we're not breaking any. Sure. Yeah. But, you know.
well, so I'm tabling this for tonight, but
Labor laws, you mean, or?
But breaking it, you know, it's
Any-
like,
or-
depends upon, you know, it's like, I don't, you know, we can't have a preference on some things, like we can't say we prefer that we're gonna hire women, or we prefer that we're gonna hire somebody who, I don't believe we can say, you know, somebody who has a disability. I don't think that we can say that we're gonna do that, right?
oh, absolutely, I think we can. But I think we need,
Labor Council's looking at various policies to see what.
Yeah,
is
I mean, I
permissible.
know federal certainly has, gives, you know, if you're a veteran, you go to the top, if you're minimally qualified, you go to the top of the list.
Yes, for veterans.
Okay, well,
For some positions.
Right, for some positions, I think that's
I'm
partly
talking
because
about
it's veterans, partly because they are already an
astronomers.
employee and.
Really?
yes,
You're talking about what?
astronomers, for instance,
Oh,
I mean, so.
Yeah. okay,
So, anyway.
but, so we're looking at that,
But
town
if, so if
council's
we
looking
don't
at
have that preference, I don't wanna have it foisted on me either.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a discussion
Yeah.
we should have.
What, another thing I think we should do, you know, much like this veterans agent position is, you know, Linda brought up regionalization of the Board of Health and then she quickly backpedaled, right? You know, and, I mean, while I appreciate her opinion, I think we should still look into it, you know, and not
Yes.
just for
Well,
Board
I'll
of
tell-
Health, but for other things, right?
Regionalization, I
Yes.
think, is
Regionalization,
key,
right.
because it's already coming up in a lot of the kitchen conversations as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, and I mean, I really think that, you know, we can save some money that way, you know, as
Mm-hmm.
long as we don't cut, you know, cut services, right? So, like we
Right.
talked about it with dispatchers, right?
Yes.
And obviously, you know, the chiefs were very vocal, about how important a local dispatcher that knows the area is, right? And, you know, and while I certainly appreciate their opinion, is that actually the case, or is that just, you know, kind of their mindset, right?
Yes.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
And I'm not pretending to know, but also same with the Board of Health, you know, is the Board of Health really that busy where somebody is needed here on a daily basis, you know, or can we have somebody?
For
in twice a
that
week?
function.
Right,
Yeah.
for certain functions,
For
right,
certain-
can we have somebody in twice a week, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, because that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right,
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, if you start chipping away at a couple of departments. You know, and then, you know, like Tim says, you know, Priscilla picks up this, maybe we need to, you know, increase staff in that area, right? Even if it's a part-time person. You know,
Yeah.
I think, you know, we need to, so there was the, you know, the report that came out, what was that now? How many years ago? With all the staffing and grading and all of that.
Oh, yeah, we need to,
Classification?
That was forever ago.
Right, but
Well,
also
at
too, I
this
think that
point, yeah,
just looked
for
at
that-
wages and classifications, not,
yeah,
you know, not the larger picture. You know, I'm not saying we need a report or a study or any of that, I think, you know, we can, you know, do a lot of the lead work, Tim. You know, just in terms of, well, like we looked at it with the housing authority, right? We looked at regionalization, and I think, you know, if we truly had a need, regionalization is what
It's-
makes sense, right?
absolutely.
You know, there are ways that, you know, we can't have it all. I mean, you know, it is Carlisle and our taxes are.
yes.
But, you know, we can't have it all, so.
It would be actually interesting to, you know, this isn't actually meant for serious discussion, but actually take a look at if the budget keeps growing at its current rate, what does that mean? You know,
over
like,
time,
when do things kind of break?
right.
Well, and eventually growth is gonna stop, right? Because
Yeah.
the lots are
There's not
getting
much-
used up.
Well, unless we
Change
rezone
this, yeah,
for densification. So, yeah, we have a lot of things that, and, you know, yeah. I think it's good for us to keep on having chances to do these kind of free.
Open-ended, yeah.
Open-ended discussions, we may not make decisions, but first of all, it helps us to know where we stand on things, and, we don't have enough time sometimes to,
It's just 2% when I first started on the board was a very different number than 2% is now.
yeah.
yeah,
And,
But it seems like it's the same number,
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right,
but it's not.
yes.
no, because it's 2% of more.
Well,
That's my
exactly,
point.
but, you
That's
know,
why.
that's the point, right?
Yeah, because it's
But in
compounding.
people's
That's my point.
minds,
Yeah.
it seems like, well, but it was 2%, you know,
People don't get it.
Yeah, well, that's
yeah,
because they're looking at the other end of the telescope, you know.
right.
Percentage increase in salary.
They're looking from inside the telescope and from outside.
This is why I've just been such a budget hawk this year, saying no.
Well,
It's just,
it has made people still, because those fees needed to be reevaluated. They had no incentive to reevaluate those fees until we said no. And then suddenly, I thought it was a wonderful idea to relook at those fees and maybe cover
Well,
some
that-
of their,
Yeah.
the time and expenses that those things are costing us. And-
Which makes sense within reason.
It does,
Yep.
within reason, I totally agree with you, but at least it's to offset some stuff for us. All right, discussion of hiring policy, so we will come back to that. I'd like to put that, probably not next agenda because, but the one after
Yeah,
that.
maybe the one after that.
Yeah? Okay. Liaison reports?
I can go and say that, you know, I did attend long-term capital requirements yesterday. It was before FinCom. I stayed for FinCom for a little while, but not too long. We heard from, no decisions were made, but we heard from, Chief Soros on the fire department requests, and, we heard, from the school committee on, the school requests. Again, no decisions were made at all. It was really just kind of the first go-through of, hearing about it. So the school has the 80,000 for technology. We did talk, about what kind of makes sense as far as, you know, of those items, what items really do meet the requirement for being, a long-term capital requirements, and I believe that this answer there was they were gonna come back with more information on that. There was discussion about, a new tractor, that they want, the current one.
For the school?
For the school. They have two, one we just replaced a few years ago, the other one's 1987.
That's the one he's
There,
only
there was some.
I haven't seen the new one yet, all I see is the old one.
There was some, you know, I had some questions about the tractor that they were gonna get back to us on. There's a very scary future number for HVAC, but that's not gonna be discussed this time. I forget actually what the other ones are.
They, at one point, wanted carpeting in various places?
Simplex fire alarm, kind of a
Oh.
phase two for that. They did do, they knew that they needed both phases, they just requested the first phase, and now they're requesting the second phase. So their total, with the full 80,000, is like, about $135,000.
And that is not included in their 2.5%.
No.
So,
You
if
know,
you added
I
that
mean,
to the 2.5%, what does that make it?
And then, you know, for the fire department, again, we had a lot of questions. There were a lot of things in there that, were more facilities related, so we just tabled them. But the ones that were kind of more directly related to just the department was, you know, potentially like, heaters for the heater bay, for the bays there, that I think would be more portable. A trailer, that they can keep the boat in. Right now, they're just using
Oh dear God.
right now, they're just using Brian's personal one. It is the trailer that would be the four-wheeler that they would like to get at some point in time. This is the trailer that's part of that.
Okay.
So then I don't know what happens to the boat. And some other equipment that, I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, what they were asking.
Can I ask you, they last year got money to buy a new washer and an extractor, from
Yeah, so we
long-term
talked
caps?
about this, and so, the washer, you mean the washing machines?
The washing machine, yes.
Right, so, they did get money for washing machines and dryers. They actually got a grant, but the grant covered washing machines, not the dryers and not the hookups, so there's extra money there. They also, had money for, equipment racks. And, Brian has really been connecting with the other fire department area, in the area. He got some air tanks for free from Lincoln, I think it is. And he got the equipment rack from
Another town.
I think it was Acton. And so we didn't have to buy that. And so then there's that money, and of course, these things come in specific. And so my question was, well, what happens? You know, so that money,
Right.
that money
Yeah,
goes.
that's my question.
That money goes into the general fund, right? But it seems to me like, and I don't know how this works, and Kim was saying it'd be very hard to do, but, if we've raised the money for a capital item and then we don't do it for some reason, the money shouldn't just go back into the general fund, because the next year we're raising money for more capital items. It should be targeted as, okay, here's our long-term capital request
Yeah.
for this year. We're gonna
Yes.
reduce it by this amount of money.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm not saying count the pennies, but
No, no,
you know, if the project
absolutely, I
didn't happen
totally
or
agree
something
with
like
you.
that.
Yeah.
You know, it's I think we just need to figure
Well-
out some way of doing that, because the budget's just going up and up and up. And,
The
you know,
way-
what they were saying was, well, it's okay because we use that free cash to bring the budget down. And that was kind of an eye opener for me, because I was always thinking, all right, well, we're using this money that's free cash because, you know, maybe, you know, I'd always kind of envisioned it as, oh, maybe growth was bigger than we thought it was, or maybe there was a windfall from a tax taking or something like that, which are the ones we always talk about. I hadn't realized that free cash was also all these other things that we then never did. And so now I'm much more inclined to spend the free cash to bring the budget down, because we probably just earned it last year for budgeting for things that we didn't really need.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
and that's
But-
what I
but
was gonna
getting-
tell you.
Or the things
that-
they.
But I think
the
getting
things
in
it
the-
was appropriated for, they got funded some other way.
Right,
And-
yes,
and
or
I
got
think
for
that
free,
getting-
yeah.
Getting back to what we were talking about before is kind of like having a view into the budget. It would be very interesting to know, when we have free cash, where did it come from?
Yes, well, that's part of that, yes, exactly, that's part of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be in that report, but is there a way that we could get that, Tim?
We could, the year-end report shows every department, whether they finished with a surplus or a deficit. And usually it generates a free cash, or, you know, the insurance, health insurance budget, or something that was, you know, maybe, you know, conservatively budgeted, and then there's a couple $100,000 that rolls to free cash at the end of the year. That's normally how it's created, or a windfall, you know, tax
This would
title.
also include, this wouldn't just be operating budget, this would also include like long-term capital items that were budgeted and just rolled in because they weren't purchased, right?
Well, I think the capital ones, until they're clawed back by town meeting, I think they just kind of stay in those accounts, unless there's a
When
specific
they are,
date.
is that right?
Yeah, unless,
That's right.
Because I was suggesting that it actually, you know, that we, you know, the next year's warrant article actually says we want to reallocate what you voted for this, to do this, and they were saying, well, no, that would be way
we've
too
been
much.
putting kind of expiration dates in the capital, the past several years, that, you know, it's good for 3 years, and then it just kind of,
But then it just goes into
rolls
free
to the-
cash.
yeah.
So it would be
Yep.
good to know, hey, that $100,000
How much is coming
came
back
from
from-
appropriation for capital.
yeah.
So I guess the question is, if it's for 3 years, do we not claw it back until 3 years from now?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so that will go into free cash 3 years from now.
Right, and
Yeah,
it's just, I
okay.
think it's just important to
But-
know where the free cash
Yeah,
is coming
no,
from.
I agree with you,
In general terms, yeah.
in general terms.
But it would typically just come from the general operating budget, right? Because like the police station, for example,
Right.
it didn't happen, right? That's 800 and some odd
Right.
thousand, right? Was that what, or was it 1.2? I forget what it was.
But that's the case, where we just don't borrow the money.
Right, exactly, so we don't, so that doesn't go into free cash, we just don't bond. it.
Right.
So there's gotta be some sort of specific type of.
Actually,
that goes-
Something that we,
Revenues, yeah.
Yeah,
something that we're asking the taxpayer to pay for.
Right,
Right.
but it's
Until
gotta
we
be something
do-
that's already in the budget, right? It's not something we would normally bond, right?
Right,
So-
the bond things, I think, are totally
Yeah,
off the table
right,
here.
No, they are, right,
Yeah.
right, but yeah, no, I just, okay, yeah, so it's not like we're gonna have 800 and some odd $1,000 in 3 years, because we never borrowed that money.
yeah,
Right,
right.
That's just, it's.
I'd be willing to bet we're talking
But we budgeted.
50,000 or more a year.
No, probably, yeah. Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is the, you know, cause you return money every year, right?
Right.
And I think, the fire department did, even though that was a different story, and, I think a lot of departments return something, David said that he always returns something, and, which is great, as long as we're not cutting services, but yeah, it'd be nice to know, because then, part of it too is, maybe, and we talked about this with the fire department for years, making the budget more appropriate. And then, if you overspend, much like Gary does with snow or whatnot, if you overspend, we'll just pay it to you next year at town meeting, you know what I mean? As opposed to, just getting it back, right? But then I guess it goes into free cash, but.
Yeah, but yeah, I love the whole concept of free cash, but it is money we've raised from the taxpayer.
Right.
It's
Right.
not actually free.
No,
Right.
exactly, right?
It's,
Yeah, no.
Right.
yeah,
And it's accounted for in the
Yes.
budget.
Right, and I think, if somebody has extra money in their budget, they're a little more likely, if they got 25,000 and it's coming into June, then, oh, well, I can get this, or I can get that.
Right,
And-
spend it because
Right.
they don't wanna,
Right, and it's not necessarily huge money, but,
Yeah.
if one department spends $5,000, another one spends 10,
yeah.
it adds up across.
Next thing you know, you got real,
Yeah,
real
school.
money.
I mean, do we ever get money back from the school? No.
No.
And I'm not saying that they necessarily have to, but.
No, we did get money back once, we got 30,000 back from them 1 year, about 4 years ago.
Wow. Surprising.
anyway, I didn't mean to derail us.
No,
No,
these
it's
again,
good
these
though.
are all
No, it's
the
good to
things
know.
that we're all, wrestling with. And all we hear about is taxes and how much taxes and we're trying to continue to give good service without raising the tax. And I actually kind of believe we have the money in our, we've already raised enough money, we just have to reallocate it in order to make it more equitable, and then everybody will be happy. I don't think we don't have to make the schools unhappy, but maybe just not quite as happy as they are,
Well, and also too, just sit down with them and have them take a little look at their budget, just a little
Right.
tighter look, instead of replacing iPads every 4 years, or maybe for 3 years, maybe you replace them every 4. And just see where that gets you, and I understand, if something breaks and we have to replace it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but you know what, it's called tightening the belt a little bit, and it's.
Well, there's, the other part is sharing some of the services that they have. They have a full-time IT plus person, right? One plus person, as far as I understand,
Yeah, I
so it's
think
not
there's a
just
couple.
one.
Yeah, I think there's a
So,
couple.
and we could use some help on IT, so, I mean, are they really needed that much? Could they not give us some help, when we need it as well?
Yeah, and it may be
you know,
that they can, maybe not all the
and
time.
so that we
but-
don't have to hire an IT person
Right,
when there's one right
right.
here, in town.
Right.
So I think there would be it would be nice if we could be more cooperative with one another about some services. Regionalize, we don't have to regionalize within a town, let's regionalize with our own school,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are ways to cut and be creative. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna happen overnight. I mean, I think it's, the problem is it takes a lot of time to research this stuff too. I mean, Nathan researched a lot of the housing stuff and you spent the better part of a year, really getting
The housing
all the
authority.
details on.
That's 2 years.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a significant amount of time, right?
Mhm.
And then there's the hurdle if you actually want to try to implement it.
Yeah, well,
You
I
know,
think, well,
the
because that's the
pushback.
other thing, it's not quite done yet either, because we, still don't have
Right.
a final thing from the state on that.
Oh, no,
I
but I'm just saying,
think
like,
it was
if we wanted to
absolutely the-
regionalize the Board of Health, right?
Right.
Yes.
We're gonna get pushback,
Oh, yeah.
and I mean, ultimately, it's still, not necessarily our decision, but, cause something like that where it's elected maybe. But yeah, you're gonna get significant pushback, right? People are, oh, well, what if my septic fails? What if I need the Board of Health? Well, it's that getting over that initial fear.
And what do you say?
Right.
And what, yeah, it's, what do you say?
Ask Ellen. Ellen says.
Yeah.
All right. John, I think we're, oh my God, we're 15 minutes off.
Oh, geez.
Do I see here,
I move for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Nathan and, Luke,